My boyfriend has secretly invited his parents to move into our house without telling me first, as they're literally moving to our house indefinitely after they sold their house because of their financial problems. And even though I've confronted my boyfriend about this and I'm trying to figure out why he did this, anytime I've talked to him about it, he said that I'm being ungrateful and accusing me of hating his family. But right now, I feel like I've been betrayed to the highest degree, and I seriously just don't know what to do anymore. Here's what's going on. Okay, so I've been with my boyfriend for 4 years, living together for almost 2. We bought a house together last year, and we had a lot of talks beforehand about boundaries, financial planning, and how important it was for both of us to feel like this was our space. Well, last week, my boyfriend casually mentions that his parents might stay with us for a while, as he put it. Now, I assumed he meant like a week or 2, maybe even like a month, which in my opinion is completely fine. They live out of state, and I know they've been struggling financially, so I didn't think much of it. Well, yesterday, I found out from my mother-in-law and not even my boyfriend that the plan isn't just a visit, because my boyfriend apparently told them that they could move in with us indefinitely, as in they've already sold their place and they're arriving next weekend with a moving truck. And when I found this out, I was stunned. I confronted my boyfriend immediately, and he acted like it wasn't a big deal. He said to me, "They're my parents, of course they have a place here." When I told him a permanent arrangement was never discussed and that I didn't consent to it, he got defensive. He then said I was being cold and ungrateful, and then he accused me of hating his family. Now, for context, I don't hate his parents. His parents are fine in small doses, but they're very traditional and openly critical of me not being wife material, meaning that we're not married and I have no plans to quit my career. His mom has made comments about how she would love to help raise the kids, even though we don't want children right now, and his father is the kind of guy who thinks women belong in the kitchen. So the idea of them living with us full time is challenging, and right now I feel completely betrayed. My boyfriend made a massive life-altering decision without my input, one that directly impacts our home, and he just keeps brushing it off like I'm the one overreacting. I don't even know how to come back from this because right now I seriously am not sure what to do. Okay, dude, this is seriously some unbelievable garbage. Like, what is going on right now? Your boyfriend basically lied to you and said, "Oh yeah, they might stay with us for a while," but he never was like, "Oh, by the way, that for a while part is gonna be forever. They're gonna live with us, it's gonna be no problem, and if you don't like it, I'm gonna call you cold and ungrateful, sorry." Like, that is so stupid, and it's so infuriating as well. Can you imagine buying a house with your significant other and them being like, "Oh, by the way, other people are moving in, let's do this." And it's like, wait a second, I own this house too, what are you doing? We need to talk about this. You can't just spring that on me and be like, "Oh, how can you not be more grateful? You hate my family, that's what it is." And it's like, no, dude, this is just something you need to talk to me about. You can't just tell me like a week before they're moving in after they sold their house that, yeah, they're gonna live with us full time. Now, I'm not saying what the original poster should or shouldn't do, but if this was me, this would 100% be a deal breaker. Like, this is a massive betrayal of trust. I think the original poster has it correct. And I just can't imagine pulling something like this and then being like, "Oh yeah, this is fine." Like, dude, no, this is not fine. This is messed up, because this is a massive red flag that I simply would not be able to ignore. If you like Am I the Jerk, you're probably going to love Am I the Genius. Check it out, link down below in the description. Also, go to amithejerk.com/submit if you would like to submit your own stories. An entitled Karen freaks out on a deli worker, demanding that they make her sandwich right then and there. But then suddenly she walks away without telling him exactly what she wants, leaving me and this worker completely baffled. Here's how it all went down. Okay, so I was waiting in line at the sub counter in the deli section of my local grocery store. There were 2 people working the counter. One of them was serving the man in line ahead of me, and another one was off to the side slicing deli meats. There was no one else in line, so I assume the latter is working on a mobile order. A third worker eventually finishes with something and gestures for me to step forward for my turn. Now, before I do, this woman suddenly cuts in front of me and starts loudly complaining to the worker that it's ridiculous her sub hasn't been made yet and she needs it right now. The worker is visibly confused, and honestly, same. I had not even seen that woman anywhere in the deli section when I arrived, so I wasn't sure what entitled her to an already completed sandwich. The guy who was previously slicing deli meats comes to the counter and tells her that he was still in the process of making her sub. She again says something about the ridiculous wait time, and he assures her that it will be completed shortly. She then tells him the general sub type that she wanted, and then she walks off. No indication of bread choice or preferred toppings. Nothing but a second disappearing act in the maybe 30 seconds it took the man to turn around to replace his gloves. He practically shouts at her, "I can't finish your sandwich unless you tell me what you want on it." Well, she doesn't return, and she's not even in the deli section anymore. So this guy's just left standing there with a stack of meat and cheese that he's not exactly sure what to do with. In the time it took for the man ahead of me in line to have 3 sandwiches made, and for me to finally finally get my own sandwich made, this woman has still not returned. The guy who has been unsuccessfully attempting to build her sandwich for who knows how long at this point lets out a sigh and says, well, how does she expect her sandwich to be magically ready for her when she's not even here? I don't get paid to be a mind reader. I then just can't help but let out a chuckle, and I wish him the best when she inevitably comes back absolutely livid that her sandwich is still not ready, because this lady absolutely looked like one of those Karens who would probably complain to the manager. Yeah, if I was the worker in this situation, I would not have made that sandwich, and I would have happily told that Karen why the second she comes back. Like, what's going on right now? This is unfair for me and the people in line. Like, what are you doing? I can't read your mind, and I know for a fact I will never get this right, and you will always be upset. So yeah, that was super messed up, and I would be very pissed off if I was working there. My entitled neighbors are literally the worst thing this neighborhood has ever seen, but after dealing with them for so long, I decided that it was now time to get some revenge. Here's what I did. So I have a crappy neighbor with a crappy girlfriend who moved into our small and tight-knit neighborhood about 5 years ago. The girlfriend, who is about 20 years younger, is okay, but he is an absolute nightmare. The first few months they were there, their very dangerous dogs kept getting out and chasing neighbors into their homes. They've dug under my fence and attacked 2 of my dogs, and thankfully they're both okay. And you can't talk to him because he's a man who cannot take accountability whatsoever. For example, a realtor reported him for leaving his boat parked at his house, and he took it out on all the other neighbors and started reporting everyone for the dumbest stuff. Well, he's now started breeding dachshunds. I have a dachshund as well, and I know that they can be stubborn to say the least, but as a responsible owner, I've trained him not to bark outside. Inside is totally fine because I get it. Stuff outside moves, but he's very well behaved outside. And if he's not, we have a backup collar that can fix that. Now, he's decided to let his dachshund stay outside all day while he's at work or when they go out to dinner or something like that. And the entire time they're gone, these dogs are barking like crazy. In fact, I have a 3-hour-long recording of them barking continuously. And also, animal control will do nothing about this because according to them, they have shade and water, which is honestly so annoying. Okay, so with that in mind, they have a pool very close to my fence, and I've heard them complaining about our very old crepe myrtle that has been there before their pool was even there. So needless to say, I'm not going to remove it. It's a shaded spot for my dogs, my chickens, and my hanging plants, not to mention a safe spot for my visiting birds. Well, we tried asking him to not keep the dogs outside all day to bark, but he told us to basically go screw ourselves. So now we have an additional crepe myrtle set up by the fence with a line of clumping bamboo right in the middle. And on a branch on the crepe myrtle they hate so much is a Bluetooth speaker that just plays a lovely ringing sound for them. And they haven't been able to use their pool in 3 weeks because the ringing is so bad. Now here's where it gets really good. They can't call the cops or the city because their fence didn't have a permit when they put it up, and they know that I'll report it immediately if they try. Oh man, I can't stand having a bad neighbor like this because they really are the worst thing in your life. They're always causing problems, they're always making life miserable, and it's like, man, you literally just cannot find any relief. If there's ever a problem in the neighborhood, it's probably from them. So I love this petty revenge. Not just because of the clumping bamboo, which by the way is gonna be a nightmare, but also the fact that you are so petty that you brought a Bluetooth speaker outside just to make a ringing noise that they literally cannot stand. Like, that really is funny to me, and from the sounds of it, these people definitely deserve it. Today, I found out that I was uninvited to my boyfriend's sister's wedding literally 2 weeks before it's happening. And now I'm honestly at an impasse because I seriously just don't know how to fix this situation. Here's what's going on. Okay, so I was told 2 weeks ago that I wasn't invited to my boyfriend's sister's wedding. I was originally invited, and I know this because while they were planning the wedding, she would speak to me about what she had been working on and planning. I was present for a conversation about the seating chart for the reception, where I was told which table I was at and who I would be sitting with, since my boyfriend is in the wedding party and he will be at the head table. Originally, I told I was uninvited because they weren't letting a family member bring their new girlfriend, so it wouldn't be fair to let me come along as well. Me and my boyfriend have been together for 2 years, we live together, we talk about getting married, and we are very much in a not new, serious, committed relationship. And also, the groom's sister is bringing her boyfriend of less than a year as well. The next reason she gave me was that I had not tried to form a relationship with her, so I shouldn't have expected to be invited. But for the past year and a half, every time she talked about wedding stuff, I offered to help out and she just turned me down every single time. I've also made plans with her and she's just bailed every single time. I've invited her to parties that we have at our home and she's only shown up to like one of them. I have also never heard from her unless I've reached out first. We have never had any issues, and when we are together at events, we get along great. I mean, I did stop trying to make plans after a year of being blown off, but I truly just don't understand what else I could have done to have a relationship with her, besides in the past when we would talk talk at family events. Me and my boyfriend are in the middle of a move right now that I am largely doing alone so he can attend wedding stuff this week. I know it's selfish to be upset because she has every right to choose who is at her wedding, but the way she went about uninviting me last minute with reasons that don't make any sense is literally just not sitting well with me. I'm not a random woman in her brother's life, and I have made sacrifices in order for her to have the very best day possible, especially moving mostly alone so her brother can spend the week with family. I simply don't want to try to build a relationship with her after this. I did reach out to her to apologize for making her feel like I didn't want to build a relationship with her, and I asked if she would want to go for coffee in a couple of weeks just to talk. Now, she agreed to go, but I don't know if I actually want to have this conversation with her, given how I was treated in this situation. I love my boyfriend with my whole heart, but I also can't see a path forward for us if I can't work this out with his sister. What should I do? Okay, honestly, this is really crappy for several reasons. First of all, the way she's treating you is so inappropriate. Like you said it yourself, you're not some random woman. You literally live with her brother, and it's like, dude, we're in a serious relationship. So the fact that suddenly she's gonna be like, oh, you can't go, sorry, claiming that you haven't made a relationship with her, like that is crazy in my opinion. And it simply just doesn't stand on its own 2 feet. Like this makes no sense. She's trying to claim that you never reached out, but honestly, from the sound of it, it seems like it's the other way around. She's the one who's never tried to reach out to you and almost like blowing you off every single time. Now, the other thing that really pisses me off about this situation is the way your boyfriend's reacting. Why is he not speaking up? Like seriously, what's going on here? It seems like, to me at least, like he's not doing anything to defend your name or say anything about this. And I totally understand the wedding is right at your doorstep and you don't want to like rock the boat, but it's like, wait a second, you haven't done anything wrong, and the very person that should be defending you is also not saying anything and remaining pretty quiet. And if you ask me, that is one big red flag that I would never be able to avoid, because this whole situation, in my opinion, seems a little bit suspicious, and I would definitely be on edge if I was in your shoes. An entitled party of 25 people all demand to be sat together at our restaurant, causing more chaos and problems than I can possibly describe, as they literally, even at the end of the night, refused to tip any of our waiters, saying that they hated our service despite the fact that all of them were so difficult to work with. Here's what happened. So when I was a teenager, I bussed tables at a semi-nice steak place in our town. It was as nice as a Midwestern restaurant could get in our small town, so oftentimes the customers thought that they were hot stuff for eating at this place. That led to customers being entitled in the first place, and a general air of people saying, oh, well, don't you know who I am? And it's like, yes, I do. It's a small town. Now, a group called 30 minutes before we opened and asked if we could seat 25 people as soon as we opened. Well, the manager said no. However, we could seat 12 people, and they would just have to sit at 2 different tables. The caller then agreed, and we prepared the tables accordingly. Well, the group of 12 arrives and immediately starts complaining about the separate tables. But these are round and they're in the middle of the dining room, so they cannot be pushed together at all. And sure, while this is annoying, unfortunately, this is not the end of it. Over the course of the next 15 minutes, 13 more people from the group start to arrive, and they demand to be seated with the main group. They came as singles and couples and have been clearly planning this for a while. Well, my manager somehow found seats for them in the same dining room as the previously sat group, but this is simply not good enough for them. They start complaining about the fact that they are sitting at different tables, that they do not have the same server, that they are too far apart, and that the food is not coming out simultaneously to all 25 people. Now, the servers were having a hard time even getting these people food. The customers were yelling over each other while the server tried to take orders, and they kept switching their seats. This meant that the servers could not keep accurate tabs on who was sitting where in order to make sure the right people got the right food. When it finally came time to pay, different people were picking up other checks who did not sit with them originally, and our servers couldn't split checks between different parties with different servers, and apparently this was more than enough to warrant them not tipping the servers at all. Because so many people were in smaller groups, like under 6 people in total, there was no added gratuity, so a few servers went through all that pain just to walk away with no tip. The main group also complained to our manager the whole time. Apparently they had reserved our banquet room for the following day, and they were appalled by the treatment that they were getting. It's also important to note that we had 2 banquet rooms for large parties, but it required a reservation deposit. One room was for huge parties of people, while the others was for parties between 15 to 30 people. Now, looking back on this 5 years later, these people definitely wanted to get out of the banquet room fee and expected special treatment since they had made reservations for the bigger room at a different date, which honestly made the entire situation unnecessary and incredibly annoying. Oh man, this is so frustrating. If I was a server in this situation, I would be losing my mind. I would be drafting up a resignation letter like right then and there, and I'd be like, no, I'm not doing this. There's no way. Screw that. I am not gonna sit here and be treated like that just for these people not to tip me after all the crap they put me through. Like, dude, I'm I'm sorry, but that's just not going to happen. That's not something I'm going to ever deal with because their behavior is super toxic and they literally were just trying to be tightwads. Not to mention not even tip the servers, which really blows my mind. My boyfriend doesn't want to marry me, all because of the money that he has that I literally have never known about. Because after I found out that he's nearly a millionaire, everything started to be explained as to why he never wants to get married. And at this point, I really just don't know what to do. Here's what's going on. Okay, I want to preface this by saying that we've been dating for 2 years and we've been living together for about half a year. And our relationship for the most part is great. We're very affectionate, we have the same lifestyle, we have similar goals and hobbies, and we spend a lot of time together. We are very compatible in all things that matter. In fact, my cats love him and I do too. He's smart, funny, and charismatic. He's very sweet and considerate, even if he's probably avoidant. He's quite reserved, analytical, and shuts down when big emotions are involved. He doesn't mean any harm though, and always makes sure that I've got everything I need. Now, when we first started dating, I asked him out before I knew anything about his finances except his job. And I kept deep questions to a minimum afterwards because it was really new in our relationship. I would ask him stuff like, well, does he have a job? Is he financially responsible? What does he think about traditional marriage? Stuff like that. We quickly learned we're both frugal penny pinchers and that suits us fine. He even liked that I offered to split the meal and have a very non-traditional gender role mindset. Now, I figured he was in a similar low bracket to me since his kind of pay isn't super high. We then agreed that traditional weddings and marriages aren't really our thing, but he seemed kind of off-put by the question, so I didn't dig any further. Well, a few months in, I found out he's got great credit, he's good at stocks, and he was aiming to try and buy a house. I thought it was very admirable, and it inspired me to grind my savings even harder so that I could catch up, since he seemed to have enough for a down payment saved up. In general, I would always pay him back, and I never asked for money or pried into his finances. I just don't move like that, and I know that men can see that as offensive, and I genuinely like him, so I didn't bother. A year in, we discussed more about how he wants kids and marriage again, with me bringing up that I think prenups are a good idea, and that I don't find it offensive if that's something that he would want to consider as well. Well, that's when I learned that when he agreed about not liking traditional weddings and marriage, he meant that he actually didn't like them, period, meaning that he will not get married at all. He insisted that prenups are too expensive, that marriage is just a piece of paper that we don't need, and that it can put us financially at risk, stating that it can screw up our taxes. He said that I'm definitely wife material and that he loves me, but also said that we don't need a piece of paper to show that. Now, I didn't know the details, so I figured that's fair, and that I wouldn't want to be a financial strain on us, so I just dropped it. Now, I don't make a lot of money, but I like to spoil him just a little bit, and we're talking dates and treats because he is so sweet to me. Eventually, he got a house, and we originally weren't going to move in, but fate had other plans, and I even paid out of pocket to move in with him another half a year in. The pay at my new job sucked, but he says I don't need to pay rent, and he wants me to save my money just like him. So I think to myself, okay, cool. I'll just split the shared finances and I take on some of the bills. We split housework accordingly, and overall it is very fair. He then explained how much he pays into the mortgage, and that he got a good loan and all this other stuff, and I thought to myself, okay, right on. He then described it as a financial strain, and I was seriously just glad to help out. And honestly, life together has been really awesome. Now, I brought up marriage alternatives one day because I would still like some kind of legal protections and some abilities if he actually wants us to have kids someday. Like, I really do want to be committed to this long-term relationship. But this time when I brought it up, he got very defensive and joked, asking if I was plotting to take him out and if I was trying to trick him into bringing it up again. But I was like, wait, why would I do that? I'm just saying that there's alternatives, and I'm trying to protect us legally and financially, since I found out how marriage would actually increase our finances when I finally ran an estimate of the numbers. Well, when I said this, he had me drop it again by saying that he'll think about alternative paperwork to mimic marriage protections but have less power overall. Well, anyways, it's our 2-year anniversary in a couple of days, and I just found out through him telling me about his stocks that he's actually almost a millionaire, and he won't let anyone near his money over his dead body. So with that in mind, I guess I'm not getting married because I could be a gold digger or something like that, where it could be perceived as someone who's just going after his money. You know, the very money I didn't even know existed for like 2 years. Maybe it was dumb of me not to have asked more questions, but it's never been about the money for me of whether he has it or not. So it sort of just stings that he's making it all about the money. So it really seems like not being able to afford a prenup is obviously a lie. I still love him, of course, but I don't know how I should navigate my feelings about this, because right now I just don't know what to do. Okay, honestly, some people in the comments are saying this, but I feel the exact same way. This guy is not treating you like a partner at all. He's literally just walking all over you and just being like, okay, yeah, you could stay, I guess. Like, this guy's not committed to you. He doesn't really care about you from the sounds of it. And yet you're trying to be like, oh yeah, he's great. He loves me so much. And that just doesn't come across at all in this post. Like, maybe there's more details we don't know, but I just do not see the love at all. So yeah, this guy is like a big walking red flag. And I think the only reason he doesn't want to get married is because he literally doesn't want you to have any of his money. And it's like, sure, good on you, but like there are ways to make this work if you really wanted to. But overall, this guy does seem kind of weird. And I know if I was in your shoes, I would definitely be on guard.
My girlfriend took the opportunity to cheat on me while my mother was dying with a guy who was just released from jail, thinking that I would be distracted with my mother's death. When I caught them, I never let them know that I knew. I did some research and found out that the guy that she cheated on me with had a long rap sheet with tons of previous crimes. So I decided to use all of that in my revenge plan. That's a very short summary of part 1, which you can listen to via the link at the top of the description in much more detail. But this is where part 2 begins. Subscribe to Am I the Jerk on YouTube and hit the bell to turn on notifications. He should have never been let out of prison, but I had my mom's funeral to focus on and had to pull myself together. By the time her funeral was over and everyone had left, I was exhausted and mentally spent. As I put my head on the pillow and tried to sleep, Angie called, not knowing my mom had passed away or that I knew what she had been up to. She'd been texting and calling much less in the days before my discovery and after. I answered the phone and tried my best to sound as glad to hear from her as I could. I didn't let on what had changed with my mom's status, nor that I knew about her and Will, or that I knew about Will. I let her do most of the talking and internalized every word I knew to be a lie, as if I totally believed her and appreciated her false sympathy. When she claimed she missed me as we said goodbye, I lied and told her the same. But in all honesty, at that moment, if she'd dropped dead, I would have not cared in the least. I had a few weeks off from work with bereavement. I knew things with Angie were over and done with. Part of me couldn't help but struggle with how cruelly she had treated me, intentionally or not. I was glad to know the truth about her and about Will before any further lies and betrayal could occur. But I felt what both of them had done to me at a time when I was struggling to keep it together was just flat out wrong. I wanted revenge. I wanted to destroy both of their lives and yet never let either of them know that I had any part of it. I called my human resources department and filled out the necessary FMLA, Family Medical Leave Act paperwork to stay out longer than my given 2 weeks. I truly had no reason to worry about getting fired, but I took the legal route and had enough of a nest egg to pay my bills for half a year or more if I needed to. Revenge on Will was quite easy. As he was on parole and a felon, even a minor charge would get him sent back to prison to finish his original sentence. But I didn't want him just to have to finish out his original sentence. I wanted new charges that would bring him so much time behind bars he never saw freedom again. I'd met his parole officer on many occasions and she knew me well enough that if I had called, she would have investigated Will. Felons have difficult times gaining employment. If he had a job, I had my doubts he was gainfully employed to be able to afford a new Mustang and insurance. I parked down the street from Angie's house in a car that she wouldn't be familiar with. I saw Will's car in her driveway. I had 2 iPhones on my account, one for work and the other for personal use. I walked down to his car and stealthily duct taped my work phone securely to the underside of his back bumper. I went back to my car and used the Find My Phone app to locate my work phone where I knew it to be. At around 2 a.m. when I heard him rev his engine before pulling off from her driveway, I casually followed him, not wanting him to suspect that he was being followed. I was about a quarter mile away from the phone signal when I noticed my phone had stopped moving. I followed the signal to a cruddy looking house in a below average part of Angie's town. His car was parked and he'd already gone inside. I wrote down the license plate number and parked down the street. I slept several hours in view of his house after seeing no activity. When the sun rose, I went and bought some breakfast to eat and returned. Over the course of the day, it was very easy to tell either Will had a lot of friends who saw no reason to stay and talk very long, or he was dealing. He was most likely dealing a highly addictive substance like C, H, or M. After a few hours, many customers returned for more of the substances he was obviously selling. I took photos of each car that stopped by along with some video. I went back each day at about the same time to document the continuing activity. I also observed each night at about 6 p.m. when I knew Angie was getting off of work, he would leave. I trailed him each night to see him meet Angie at a restaurant or went straight to her house. I had major doubts that she'd ever been to his house, at least not that house. I had enough evidence to turn it in to the local police, but I decided to document his activities one more day, as I knew he hadn't been out to get more substances to sell. That last day, I staked out his house around 3 p.m. People stopped coming by, which was unusual. I sat and observed when about 30 minutes later, a large black Cadillac Escalade pulled into his driveway. I had usually seen no more than one person get out of a vehicle and go into Will's house. This time, I observed 3 large males exit the vehicle and open the back door to escort a middle-aged man inside. They stayed in Will's house for over 2 hours, which absolutely nobody had been doing. I was fairly certain the middle-aged man was his source for the substances he was selling. I drove by taking a picture of the Escalade license tag. At home, I downloaded the photos and video I'd taken of Will's activity to my computer. I made a detailed report citing activity from the 4 days I'd observed of what was going on. When I finished, I printed out 30 pages of photos of people heading for Will's door to buy these substances. I saved all video of activity I'd recorded to a SIM card and placed it into a small plastic box for safekeeping. I knew it wouldn't take much to convince the police of what Will was up to. I was giving the cops actual admissible evidence with times and dates stamped on each photo and video, but I wanted to put so much heat on him that the police would be the least of his worries. The next morning, I went by the town's police station in Angie's town. I calmly walked in requesting to speak to someone in their narcotics division. A uniformed officer came out of the office section. I shook his hand and I handed him one of my business cards. He stared at the card for several seconds as 2 of the lawyers in the firm I worked for regularly worked in Angie's town. The cop knew the business card carried quite a bit of clout, even if I never passed the bar exam. I told him I had some information he might want to take a look at. The detective happily led me back to a conference room where we made small talk about mutual acquaintances. But soon, I pushed a folder of paperwork and the box with the SIM card across the table towards him. Listed on the first pages was Will's full name, date of birth, his criminal record, and parole officer. The detective examined the photos and I sat quietly as he did. By the expressions on his face, he obviously realized he'd been given some information that could easily lead to an arrest warrant for Will. He must have also imagined how much narcotics those arrests could get off the streets, potential promotions, and other positives. He thanked me for the evidence and placed the folder back down on the table. He asked me if I would be willing to testify. I explained how damning the evidence was so I wouldn't have to. He smiled and casually asked if there was anything I needed. I explained that I felt Will had been allowed out of prison far too soon. It was obvious he had not been rehabilitated and deserved to go back to jail for much longer. The detective agreed, but again asked what I wanted in exchange for the information. I pulled out a photo of the black Escalade with a license plate number and pushed it towards him. I asked him to write the tag number down for his own benefit. I explained the owner of the Escalade might be an even bigger dealer. I reaffirmed that I wanted my name kept out of any police or court reports. He agreed. I then lied and said that my firm was representing someone who may have been set up by the owner of the Escalade. He knew I could have gotten one of the lawyers in my firm to call in a favor for the information, but he always knew lawyers like to use their favors sparingly. He thought quietly for a few seconds, realizing I'd given him yet another lead to potentially follow. I'd done more detective work in 5 days than his entire staff had done in months, so he happily agreed. 10 minutes later, he returned with a printout of the tag with the name and address of who it was registered to. I folded the printout and put it into my pocket. The detective and I made some more small talk about sports and cars before I shook his hand and headed out to my car. I drove home knowing that a judge would soon be filling out an arrest warrant for Will. I kept to myself for a few more days, monitoring the arrest reports from Angie's local paper online. One morning, the front site showed a photo of a very bewildered Will being led away in handcuffs. As long as nobody had made any stupid errors to get him off on a technicality, he'd be finishing out his original time plus many additional years. There was always the possibility that he may get a good lawyer to get the charges reduced or find some loophole to get him off scot-free. I couldn't couldn't and wouldn't allow that to happen. I drove to the location that the cop had given me. Sure enough, there was a large luxury vehicle sitting in the driveway of a modest house. Down the street, I waited about an hour until I saw what I believed to be one of his bodyguards leave in a different car. I followed and watched the guy go inside a mini mart. I parked around the other side so my vehicle was hidden. I got out of my car, lit up a smoke, and waited for the guy to come out. My sunglasses obscured my face quite a bit. When he exited the store, I called him over telling him I needed to tell him something. I'm sure he thought I was just going to ask for gas money or tell him he needed to find Jesus. When I told him I had some information his boss, who I'll call Marcus, might want to know, he was shocked. He asked who I was. I told the guy none of that was important, but I was certain with the information I could give him, Marcus would greatly appreciate it. He began looking around nervously, thinking that it might be a bust, but I told him to relax. I told him to tell Marcus that Will had gotten busted, which he knew to be true, and had every intention of cutting a plea bargain. I suggested that Marcus get one of his boys in county jail to have a talk with Will, but I also explained they all needed to lay low until the heat had died down. Of course, I had no idea if any plea bargain was on the table, but a stranger volunteering such information out of the blue sure as hell wasn't going to look good to his boss. I knew how things work well enough to know that if Will made it to prison, the average dealer had enough connections inside to leave Will eating out of a feeding tube the rest of his days, or worse. As I walked away, the guy asked me my name, and obviously wanted to get his piece from his car. I simply explained that Will had some payback coming from a previous betrayal, and that Marcus had picked the wrong guy to sell his product. That wasn't a lie. He'd betrayed me. Neither Will nor Angie had any inkling of my past, or how vengeful I could be, but it was enough to get the bodyguard to take my advice seriously. He quickly walked to his car as I hurried around the building. I slipped into a grocery store and watched Marcus's bodyguard drive around the parking lot several times looking diligently. When I saw him pull out of the lot and speed down the road, I calmly exited the store, got into my car, and drove towards home. I hadn't been driving 10 minutes when my phone rang. The caller ID let me know it was Angie calling. When I answered it, I tried to act surprised and happy to see her. Without even a friendly greeting, she asked how I couldn't have let her know my mother had passed away. She'd seen the obituary in my city's newspaper. I simply replied that it had seemed she was busy enjoying life and that I didn't want to be a burden to her with my grief. I quickly asked why she hadn't been calling or texting as much lately. That led to her changing the subject and asking to see me. I tried my damnedest to act happy to hear from her and told her that I missed her. I asked her if she could meet me out for dinner at our favorite restaurant in town. She readily agreed. Since Will was no longer around to keep time with, she was glad to have me back to fill in the void. I showed up to dinner with a smile and a long hug, trying to control the urge to break her spine in half. I was surprised she didn't say anything when I avoided kissing her. I'm sure she just assumed that in my grief, romance wasn't something that I had in my mind much. I just had a very good idea what her mouth had been doing, and I didn't want Will's salad-tossing, knob-slobbering prison germs on me. We sat at the bar and ordered 2 drinks from our favorite bartender. He knew us as a couple because we always tip very well. When our drinks arrived, I excused myself to the restroom and typed a short message out on my phone that read, "Make my drinks with no alcohol and make hers doubles." When I returned from the restroom, I sat next to Angie at the bar discussing drinks we'd enjoyed but hadn't tried in quite a while. I acted as if I was going to pull up the recipe for some unusual drink. The bartender came over and asked if we were ready for another drink. I told him we were celebrating after not seeing each other for quite a while. I held up my phone for him to read the message, asking if he knew how to make that drink. He read the message and smiled, agreeing the drink I'd requested was a specialty of his. I'm sure the bartender and Angie assumed she could get as sloshed as she wanted and that she'd be heading back to her place with me afterward. I had other plans. Angie commented on how strong hers was. I told her I could barely taste it in mine. We ordered several more drinks. Angie commented about how sloshed she felt. I acted confused, stating that I barely felt a buzz at all. After several hours, I paid for our dinner and drinks with a sizable tip. As we exited the door, I acted like I'd gotten a very important call, which I needed to take. After the obligatory, nonsense, non-existent phone call, I told her I had to rush back to my town to the office. One of the lawyers needed something for a case early the next morning. I asked her to go to her house and wait on me, promising the errand wouldn't take long. I helped her into her car and watched her pull off before using my cell phone to immediately call the police and tell them that I'd seen a drunk driver leaving that restaurant. I urged them to hurry. The person was in no shape to be driving. I jumped into my car and headed towards Angie's house about 2 miles away. About a mile from her house, I saw saw blue lights ahead of me and slowed down to see Angie's car pulled over, I knew she was going to get a DWI, as that is in fact what I had planned. What neither she nor I knew was that Will had been using her car to deliver the white powder to low-level dealers under him. They did the obligatory search of Angie's car and found several ounces of the white powder stashed beneath the back seats. I had absolutely no intention of getting her arrested for narcotics possession with the intent to sell, but the fact that Angie had given me her spare car key the same night she'd given me her spare house key, I knew Will could have just as easily been the one to screw up my life. Neither still had any idea that I knew about their unscrupulous cheating that was revealed to all later. As I arrived back at my house and my cell phone rang from a strange number, I answered to hear Angie crying and blubbering while trying to tell me something. I got her to calm down. I actually wanted to hear what she had to say. She managed to tell me that she was in jail, to which I innocently asked where and for what. When she told me what she had been arrested for, I was genuinely shocked about the drug arrest. I asked her what she wanted me to do. She wanted me to help get her out and asked me to post bond. I explained that since my mom had died, I couldn't risk putting up any of my property due to probate issues. I could have easily put my own home up as collateral, but I viewed her drug charges as collateral damage, as she damaged my life enough. The charges for possession of the powder with intent to distribute carried mandatory time. I felt after what she'd done to me, with who she betrayed me with, part of her deserved what was coming to her. I went to her arraignment and sat in the back hoping not to be noticed. As she entered the courtroom, she saw me. I gave her a look of confusion as to how she could ever be arrested for such a crime. I knew damn well, of course, but I had to act totally oblivious. When she tried to explain to the judge that her boyfriend had been arrested for dealing only a few days before and it had to be his, the judge didn't want to hear it. She turned around and looked at me in shame, with tears in her eyes, realizing I knew she'd been cheating. I shook my head in disgust as they led her away. She knew any attempt to contact with me ever again would be a fool's errand. Bond was set extremely high for both. At Will's trial, he pled guilty and asked to forego a trial in an attempt for leniency. He got none. Angie's trial took place a few weeks later and she accepted a plea. She got 6 years with the possibility of parole in 3. But her career was over when she got out and I didn't care one bit. They'd messed with the worst person they could have ever crossed at the absolute worst time to cross me. She started her sentence 2 months ago. Her parents apologized to me. In all honesty, if she cheated on me at any other time in my life with almost anyone else, I doubt I would have sought out any revenge. But as they say, timing is everything, and their timing could not have been worse. In some ways, I'm not proud of what I did. Will deserved to be behind bars for the rest of his days, if for nothing else but for his previous deviant crimes. Angie deserved to have any chance at a future destroyed, though all I had intended for was for her to lose her license and her job. I accomplished both for her, and I hope like hell her years of incarceration are miserable, and she regrets she was ever born. None of us truly ever know who we are dealing with at any given time and who not to cross. But when love turns to hate, any and every human is capable of things they would have never dreamed. All she had to do was tell me she needed a break or say she'd met someone else. Instead, she chose to feed me lies and lies of omission. Be careful who you betray. They just might be willing to go the extra mile to ruin your present and future so badly that you have no future at all. Feel free to think of me as cruel, a monster, or think I deserve just as bad of a punishment as they received. That's your prerogative. And maybe I did, but I didn't get caught by the authorities or someone who'd endured way too much in life to just let things slide. Am I the jerk? Probably the most excruciating part of the entire aftermath was the fact that when he went to her arraignment, her plan was already to tell the judge that she had a boyfriend who was dealing, and that was the reason why they found that in her car. She was obviously surprised that the OP was there, but that wasn't enough to change her game plan. She still said that to the judge in front of him, and then looked at him, which he interpreted as meaning she knew that she could never contact him again. There's a strange question of what ifs when it comes to this situation, because had the OP not known what had happened between the two of them, and she chose not to say this to the judge at that moment, then chances are he probably would have stuck with her. And she knew that, but she thought that the tiny % chance that it would change her outcome legally would be worth forsaking anything with the OP in terms of a relationship. I understand understand why the OP would be so hurt and angry by all of this, but one of the parts that I don't like or support about what he did was the whole situation when they went to the bar. First of all, it's shocking that the bartender would actually go along with this because you're taking away somebody's choice. And I guess what the OP is trying to say is the reason he was able to pull this off was because the both of them had been to this bar many times and they tipped a lot, so that this guy was friendly with them. In other words, the bartender knew that she was with someone safe and not just a random person. But that still doesn't sit right. And it turns out she wasn't with someone safe. She was with somebody that was trying to get her all sloshed up and put her into a dangerous situation. Does that excuse anything that she did to him? No, of course not. But that also doesn't mean that he should have done this. When it comes to the whole police Marcus Will situation, that is very eye-opening how easily the police slipped the OP all this information just because of who they thought that he was associated with. And obviously he provided them value too by creating this whole folder on Will. But the fact that he got all of Marcus's information and he was able to find him, go to his bodyguard, deliver this message, and put Will into actual mortal danger is a testament to how careless some people can be with sensitive information and how far the OP was really willing to go. So now that you know everything, which parts of this revenge do you agree with? Which parts do you disagree with? And jerk or not a jerk, and why? I made my wife think that I was cheating on her, but I wasn't, I never have, and it was all part of the plan. Here's what happened. Subscribe to Am I the Jerk on YouTube and hit the bell to turn on notifications. I hope you've got some time and a snack because this one is going to be long, as the events that follow span from late 2019 to last week. So here's the backstory. My soon-to-be ex-wife was my high school sweetheart. We started dating in 1992 when we were both only 17. We're both 45 years old now. We've been together ever since. She's the only woman I have ever been with in my entire life. We married 5 years later at 22, fresh out of college. A year later, we had our first of 2 children, both boys, 22 and 17 years old. 23 years I gave to her. I built her a house, worked my butt off to give her the life she wanted. Sure, we had rough patches, but what marriage doesn't? Even in the worst of times, we found a way to pull through and come out the other side better, which made the discovery of her affair that much more jarring. Flashback to March of 2020, when I got the first feeling that something was off. For a good 2 months prior, we were in a funk. I was on the mend from reconstructive knee surgery. I blew out my ACL in fall of 2019, but still lacked in movement. At the time, I only had about 55% range of motion in my knee. This took a toll on quite a lot in the house. I was out on workers' comp as I had been injured on the job, and I was unable to do my usual household duties, so a lot got backed up. My sons would do what they could, but tasks that only I was capable of doing had to be put on the back burner, or my wife had to do them, which she wasn't pleased with. Things also crawled to a standstill in the bedroom between us. It had already slowed down prior to my injury, but in the state I was in at that time, it completely stopped. During these months, she, we'll call her Sue, was spending more time, quote, hanging with coworkers after work. Between November of 2019 and March of 2020, it was a regular occurrence for her. Naturally, I thought nothing of it. I've never, in the 23 years I've been with her, had any reason to worry or to not trust her. She has her friends, I have mine, and we have mutual friends. I'd go hang out with my friends all the time, and there was no issue. It was all above board. It was around January of this year that I noticed something odd. Sue started getting noticeably distant with me. Sure, we were in a funk, but she'd never deny me affection to that point. The usual hugs and kisses she'd give me came to a halt. Her phone was attached to her hand long before my suspicion grew, but she'd always share and show me things she'd discovered on the web. DIY ideas and recipes on Pinterest, memes, all kinds of stuff. But she was now being guarded about her phone. Even her interactions with me became more snippy, as if she couldn't be bothered. So we're now in March. COVID has arrived and New York City is locked down. Our chosen careers fall under the essential designation, so neither of us have to work from home. I'd just been recently cleared to return to work after 5 months on the shelf, and I was eager to get back after it, as 5 months on my butt rehabbing my knee and not being able to do physical stuff drove me nuts. For context, I enjoy physical activities. I am an avid martial artist, and I typically am in the gym 4 days a week on top of all the home projects I did. Within a week or two of lockdown, my soon-to-be ex-wife alerts me that she's going to have to start putting in extra hours. Again, I think nothing of this because of her field. Of course, I was under the assumption that it'd be every other day, but no, it was every day. And not just an hour or two, she'd come home 3 or more hours later, go straight to the shower, spend a little time with me, a little time with our 17-year-old. The 22 22-year-old lives with his girlfriend across town, and then go to bed. As I'm able to support myself and my knee better, we start getting intimate again. But as you'd probably guess, she wasn't mentally or emotionally present for it, which I noticed quickly. So by early April, the picture started getting clearer to me. All of the signs were pointing to the idea that she was having an affair. That's when I decided I needed to find answers. So I scoured the internet on things I should be looking for, signs of infidelity in one's partner, and sure enough, she was pretty much ticking all of the boxes on such behavior. So then my search inquiry advanced to how I find proof. It started with her social media. Looking at her Facebook entries from months prior, it's pretty much the usual. Pictures of us and our sons, pictures with her and her friends, and more than a few pictures of her nights out with coworkers. In these pictures, it's a mixed bag of her closest friends from work and a couple of folks who I've never met from her work, but I see one recurring thing in a number of these pictures. One guy. In every picture he's in, he's rather uncomfortably close to her. His arm is around her shoulder or his hand on her lower back. Way too close for a guy I've never personally met. Needless to say, that put a sour taste in my mouth. But that wasn't the worst of it. No. The worst part was the fact that apparently this dude is a friend of hers on Facebook and follows her on Instagram. So I go look up his Facebook account and wouldn't you know it, I'm blocked. Why the heck am I blocked from seeing this guy's Facebook account? But he's friends with her on Facebook. Yep, now I'm in Batman detective mode. At that point, I wasn't even trying to deny it. I knew she was cheating on me with this guy. My mission was to find out for how long. And over the course of April and May, that's what I did. You know, I never had any clue the depth of information you could secure from a phone, text, and email records up until then. We have a family plan cell phone package, and I was able to pull up quite a bit of data. My soon-to-be ex-wife's data history was telling. The two most frequent numbers she had interacted with from October of 2019 to April of 2020 was my mom and a number that I've never seen before. Take a wild guess whose number it was. A quick check on Google, and I confirmed it was the dude from the photos who blocked me on Facebook. We'll call him POS because that's what he is. Again, the picture becomes even clearer at this point, but a lot of their messages and texts were disjointed, which meant she was deleting a lot of them. I knew she was cheating on me with this guy, but nothing in the data could serve as a smoking gun. I needed more evidence. It's at this point that I tell my best friend Oz what I had found. He asked me, did I confront her with what I had? And I said no because I felt like it wasn't enough. That's when he told me about an app that I could download to apparently spy on her communications in real time. I won't say the name as I don't know the rules on that here. I got it installed, synced up to my data plan, and waited. Within days of doing so, I finally saw it. A text string between the two of them talking about how much fun they'd had the previous night and making plans to do it again that weekend. Boom. Gut punch. To say that I was completely devastated was an understatement. I guess that moment counts as my D-Day, and for the next 2 days after, I was just broken. I actively distanced myself from her those 2 days immediately after D-Day, which she was noticeably shaken by. She tried to console me and ask me what was wrong, but I'd brush it off and leave her presence. I couldn't even look at her. This woman who I gave 23 years of my life to, who I have given everything I could and more to as a husband, and she stepped outside of our marriage for a guy just 5 years older than our eldest son. By the third day, I wasn't even sad anymore. I was pissed. I contacted Oz to let him know my suspicion was confirmed, and he asked me if I had confronted her yet. My answer was no, and I told him that I wanted payback. I didn't want to just divorce her. I wanted to destroy her. I wanted to leave her life in shambles and ruin her. It was going to take time to do so I devised a plan. In my readings and research on infidelity, I had saw a quote that resonated with me that went, "The enemy of infidelity is unpredictability," or something to that ilk. That was going to be the basis of my plan. I was going to make her life hell on wheels, while also secretly planning my exit strategy. So we're now in early June and I've still got the app installed. Pretty much every night I'm gathering as much data as I can, seeing their back and forth messages. They're talking like it's a full-blown relationship they're in. Texting, lovely, dopey, romantic stuff. Exposed images of each other, the whole bag. At that point, I had stopped looking at any of it. I was just collecting information and cataloging on my private FPS server. Meanwhile, while, I start doing things out of the ordinary. I start going out at odd times. I start coming home even later than she does. In her presence, I'm on my phone a lot more than the usual, and when she asks, "What are you up to?" I just simply say, "Just stuff," and put my phone away. I'd also change my login information on everything so she couldn't access any of my stuff. Mind you, for our entire marriage, we've never hid anything from each other. But right around, I'm assuming the start of her affair, she changed her password on Facebook as well as on her phone, stating that she, quote, had to because of the security breaches in recent months. Yeah, really nice cover for hiding your affair from your husband. Anyway, I clued Oz in on my plan, as well as telling my older and only sister and 2 more of my closest friends as to what was going on. These are people I trust my life with, and I swore them to secrecy. For context, Oz and I have been friends since we were kids. The other of our friends, Joey and Nina, we've known since high school. Make note of Nina, she comes into play down the road. July comes and my soon-to-be ex-wife is in full paranoia mode. She's texting and calling me a lot more frequently now, asking me if I'm going to be home when she gets home. When am I coming home? While she is, and I'm not, asking me what I'm up to, the works. I can see the seed planted in her head the month prior is starting to sprout, especially in her communication with POS. She's confiding in him about her doubt and confusion, telling him that I'm getting cold and distant. The nerve of this woman. In the interim of these interactions with POS, she suggests that maybe they should stop meeting up at our house because she has no idea if I just show up, confirming that yes, she's had this jerk in my home. Thanks, Sue. POS asks her in that specific communication, was she worried about me potentially cheating on her? Which actually pissed her off. I can't even begin to describe the level of joy and how many laughs I got out of reading that exchange. My cheating wife arguing with her affair partner over if she's mad her husband could be cheating on her. Oh, the irony. Now, bear in mind, I'm not hooking up with anyone. When I leave, I'm usually at Oz or Joey's, throwing back some brewskis, watching fights, and spending time with my bros, or at my big sister's house hanging with her and my brother-in-law, who's like an older brother to me. My sister is 52 and her husband is 58. She had told him about my soon-to-be ex-wife's infidelity, but not of my plan. Couldn't risk it as he's a bit of a blabbermouth. Well, fast forward now to October. That's when things seriously pick up. I've been in my faux affair for 3 months now, and Sue is hyper aware of the fact that I'm actively pulling away from her. It's been as long as the day I enacted my plan until the day she confronted me on October 20th, 2020, that I'd even touched her. No hugs, no kisses, no initiation of intimacy, nothing. Not like she needed it. She was still doing POS just at his place or at motels. So that afternoon, she calls me at work, which wasn't rare before all of this, but certainly hadn't happened in a while, and asks me to come straight home after work, saying that she had, quote, something important to tell me. I'm not gonna lie to you all, I half believed she was gonna come clean about her infidelity, but she of course didn't. Instead, I get home to her asking me, was I unhappy with her? The absolute nerve. She cites the fact that I've been spending way too much time away from home. I didn't show her any affection anymore, and our bedroom life has completely died. She tells me she's worried that I'm pushing her away because I was resentful of how she treated me the months I was rehabbing my knee. And then came the punchline. She asked if I was cheating on her. Folks, I fell on the floor laughing hysterically. And when I say hysterically, I mean Joker laughing gas hysterical. On the surface, it looked like, to her, assuming, it was me laughing at the notion of being unfaithful, but it was of course actually me laughing at the sheer irony of what was happening in front of my eyes. I'm tearing up, pounding on the floor in complete hysterics for a good 2 minutes before I compose myself enough to answer. I sit up and look her in the eyes for the first time in months, shaking my head. I don't give her an answer. I stand up, brush myself off, kiss the top of her head, and go about settling in for the night. Later that night, as I'm in my office, I decide, you know what? Given the brevity of what happened, I wanted to see what she was telling him. So I fire up the app, and sure enough, they're actually texting in real time. She tells POS, I know he's cheating on me. I asked him tonight and he literally laughed in my face. He fell on the floor and laughed for like 5 minutes. It wasn't 5 minutes, obviously. He doesn't even care how I feel anymore. I don't know how or why, but he is gone. I know I've lost him. This is karma. I know it. The smile I had on my face reading that must have resembled a Cheshire cat. She was breaking. POS attempted to console her, saying that if I cared enough for her, she wouldn't have come to him to give her what I wasn't giving her. But the tone of her responses told me that she was having doubt now. She had the nerve to step out of our marriage because I was unable to fulfill my role as a husband due to a legitimate injury, and kept the affair going for, at that point, nearly an entire year. But the idea of her losing me to another woman was enough to make her waver? What a weakling. Now, during all of this, I was also extracting the second part of my plan for payback, getting all of my affairs in order financially. In September, I had met with a family attorney to get the ball rolling on divorce papers. With the mountain of evidence I've piled up to that point, New York is an at-fault state as far as divorce, and the overwhelming amount of proof that I'd gathered by displaying Sue's infidelity pretty much solidified I could nail her to the wall in a divorce case. My lawyer instructed me to get all of my financials in order in preparation for whatever division of assets might come as a result. I went one better than that, secretly pulling all of my money out of our joint account and putting it into my personal account. I also started shopping around for an apartment as a part of phase 2. We're now in November and I've not changed my behavior. In fact, I've ramped it up. This is where my friend Nina comes into play. For context, Nina and Sue have never been what you would call close. I met Nina freshman year of high school, 2 years before I met Sue. Even way back then, Sue has seen Nina as a threat, as she's my closest female friend. There's always been an implied, "I don't trust her" from Sue regarding Nina. She's never addressed it directly, but it's obvious to anyone who pays attention. Conversely, Nina has never been a big fan of Sue. Early in me and Sue's relationship, Nina called attention to me how Sue was pretty much imposing herself into our little square of friends, whereas I didn't do the same with Sue's set of friends. That irked Nina because she knew why Sue was doing it. Her. Among Sue's circle, even now, there are no male friends aside from POS, whereas Nina is the only girl in my square. Nina has been stuck overseas due to the virus and finally returned to New York City on November 3rd. Oz, Joey, and I decided we are going to celebrate her return with a night at Joey's house for dinner and drinks. There was only 5 of us: Oz, Joey, Joey's wife, who was also Nina's sister, Nina, and myself. Sticking to CDC guidelines, we take the Rona very seriously. Nina, being the evil mastermind she is, comes up with an evil idea to trigger Sue. She suggested we take some photos in the same vein of the photos that I discovered of Sue in POS months prior and post them to my Facebook, and that's just what we did. It wasn't until the 5th that Sue got wind of it, as I'm guessing a few friends noticed my updates and saw how uncomfortably close I was with Nina. This really messed with her mind because she still believed that I was cheating, and I can almost guarantee she wanted to accuse Nina, but she knew that Nina had been stuck in Europe for the majority of the year. Still didn't stop her from attempting to dress me down that night for being so, as she said, handsy in the pictures. I saw this as a golden opportunity to deliver the lead jab for my knockout blow. I say, "So what about the pictures with you and POS from last year? He was pretty handsy in them, but did you see me get bent out of shape over it?" Deer in headlights. It was the first time I even mentioned the dude's name throughout all of this. The hamster wheel in her head started reeling in real time as she tried to explain away those pictures. To that point, she hadn't even known that I saw them. That's how little I use Facebook. When I actually do post something, it's like an event to people, which is why the pictures with Nina specifically got so much traction among our circles. And explain away she did.
"He's that way with everyone. He's just a really friendly guy. I can see how it looks, but there's nothing there. I'm sorry if those pictures hurt you. I'll delete them."
No, the pictures aren't what hurt me. The year that you've been doing the dude whilst lying to me that you're working extra hours and hanging with friends is what hurt me. But vengeance, as Lieutenant Commander Worf from Star Trek The Next Generation so famously said, is a dish best served cold. From that night, Sue was being extra specially clingy and attentive to me, like annoyingly so. She's trying to initiate affection and intimacy with me, and I'd stonewall her at every chance. All the while, I'm still archiving everything she says to POS. Mind you, by this point, I'd long since gone numb. Any desire I might have had to save my marriage was dead. I'd checked out the day I enacted the first phase of my plan. She's confiding in him that I've gotten worse, that she doesn't know what to do, and she feels like I absolutely hate her. I do. Then comes the bombshell. She says she can't see him anymore. The guilt is too much for her, and she feels like karma is suffocating her. She can't risk losing losing me. She says that she loves POS deeply, but she's still in love with me, and she has to save her marriage before she loses me. No, my dear, you're about 8 months too late for that. POS loses his mind saying such lovely things as, he doesn't love you the way I love you, and you're making a mistake. You can't just throw me away like this. That text chain would be the last thing they'd have until about 3 weeks ago. Throughout the remainder of November into December, Sue is stuck in limbo. She's been trying to gauge where my headspace is and is still unable to tell if I'm actually being unfaithful. Meanwhile, POS is steadily blowing up her phone daily, but she's not responding to him. I'd see her check her phone often and then quickly put it away. Meanwhile, phase 2 of the plan was now officially complete. The divorce papers were done. I'd found me a studio apartment in Co-op City. New Yorkers will know the area, and I signed a 2-year lease on it. All of my money was in my personal account. I was ready to throw my haymaker. So, we're now at Thanksgiving. My oldest and his girlfriend were hosting a small gathering of our immediate families. So them, oldest and his girlfriend, oldest girlfriend's parents, she's an only child, myself, Sue, and our youngest. We have a great night. My oldest's girlfriend is studying to be a chef, and she did all the cooking herself. This girl can cook, let me tell you. As I had to keep up appearances of nothing being wrong between Sue and I initiated affection with her several times that evening. Kisses on the cheek, cute little hugs, wrapping my arms around her shoulder from behind. The gestures didn't go unnoticed by her, as she reveled in it. Bear in mind, this was the first time I touched this woman since I kissed the top of her head the night that she confronted me in October, so just about 2 months. Not gonna lie, I felt repulsed by doing it, but I had to. I couldn't risk the plan. And me being distant to her in the face of my boys and my oldest girlfriend and her parents would set off alarms. So my youngest decides he wants to stay over with his big brother for the night, so Sue and I head home. On the drive home, she thanks me for being so good to her and says,
I don't know what you're going through, baby, but I'm here for you.
I just had to hold off busting out into maniacal laughter again, but I responded saying, I know, I just need time. So for the first time realistically since springtime, we did the deed that night. I figured, why not? With what I'm about to do, I may as well get some action before I delete her from my existence. I won't go into detail, but it wasn't lovemaking. When I was finished, she was a lump of flesh laying there trying to figure out the direction of the truck that ran her over. No cuddling or anything after. I just got up, showered, and went to sleep in my office. To her confusion though, I used protection. The first time in 2 decades I did. She was definitely perplexed by it, but she didn't ask questions. I sure as heck wasn't going to go raw knowing what she'd been up to with POS for months at that point. I wake up the next day and check my handy dandy spy app for the first time in weeks. She responded to POS. Dude went full novella. He professed his love for her, said she was wasting her time trying to rekindle a flame in me that died, that she'd been in a prison with me for 23 years and deserved to experience the love and affection of a man who would cherish her. Mind you, this dude is 27 years old, 5 years older than our oldest son, and he's that sprung on a 45-year-old married mother of 2? What a grade A high quality simp. And what happens next is the most intense nuclear revenge you can imagine, but that is in part 2, which will be the very next video here on the channel. By the time you're watching this, it's probably already out and linked at the top of the description, so check the link at the top of the description, and if for some reason it's not, subscribe and hit the bell to turn on notifications so you don't miss it. How do you betray someone that you've put your trust in for 23 years and they've put their trust in you? Did she just get so used to him that she doesn't see him as being something special or remarkable and she just assumed that he'd always be there since he had always been there? If she ever loved him at any point during these 23 years, why wouldn't she at least break up with him before doing all of this? Yes, it would be painful, but nothing like what she put him through, where she would ultimately get found out anyway. I feel like most things like this in life end up bubbling to the surface no matter what happens, so if you're trying to be sly and sneaky and think you're gonna get away with it, it seems like most of the time that ends up not being the case. Eventually, it will come out, and I'm sure some part of her deep down knew that, even if she doesn't realize it in this moment. It's kind of surprising to me that he so quickly chose to go down this route of making her think that she was being cheated on also, by him, the OP. But I get what he's trying to do. He's trying to dig the knife deeper and twist it, so that he creates some sort of infighting between POS and her. But the one thing thing a lot of people seem to not agree with is the whole spy app thing. So that's my question to you. Do you think the spy app was going too far, or is it somehow justified in this situation? And of course, jerk or not a jerk, and why? My wife cheated on me with a guy that's basically the same age as our son. So I enacted nuclear revenge. I completely ghosted her, vanished from her life like Houdini after 23 years of marriage. But what she did in response to that gets a lot darker. Here's what happened. Subscribe to Am I the Jerk on YouTube and hit the bell to turn on notifications. She chose to blow up our marriage and destroy the home we'd built for this dude, pretty boy with a soft side. Ha. She responded saying pretty much the same thing she said when they last talked, that she loves him and enjoyed their time together, but she can't lose me. I'm still the love of her life, but she'll always have a place for him in her heart. That they can still be friends if he chooses, but the physical relationship between them is over. He begged her to see him one last time, and yep, you guessed it, she said yes. One more for the road, right? Who am I to say anything? That's what I did to her the previous night. Of course, I added all of that to the archive I'd compiled. December 4th is when Phase 3, the final phase of Operation Shinobi Ghost, started. The divorce papers were in hand. My new place of residence was set up. Now I had to start slowly moving my stuff out of the house. But first, I had to break the news to my boys. I called my oldest to the house that Friday night, had them join me in my office, and laid everything on that table. Not the specifics, but that their mother had been cheating on me for over a year, and I was going to be filing for divorce soon. My 17-year-old was especially shaken up by this because he himself had just recently experienced his first taste of infidelity. Yup, his first girlfriend had cheated on him just 4 months prior. Seeing his heart broken a second time at the idea that his own mother was capable of doing this hit him hard. My oldest took it a lot better and suggested taking his brother in to live with him until this blows over, to which I agreed. We packed up some of his stuff and he asked me if I was going to be okay. I told him, yes son, I'm going to be alright and so are you. We are going to be alright, I promise. And then they were off. The hardest part was now over and it was now time to arm the nukes. Over the next few weeks, day by day, Oz would help me get a little of my most sensitive stuff out of the house. Gave him a list of all the definite stuff to grab while Sue and I were at work and left him the spare key. This was all stuff Sue wouldn't notice was missing until you told her it was gone. I'd also gotten a new phone and a new phone number and told everyone who needed to know, Oz, Joey, Nina, my boys, Big Sis, and my mother, my new contact information. Meanwhile, I'm keeping up with the ruse with Sue and she's none the wiser, trickling bits and pieces of affection to her just to keep her off the trail, whilst she's still in contact with POS. Not to the extent that they had been prior, but there's still an emotional thing happening. The fog is faint, but it's still there. All the while, I gather everything, and I do mean everything. Every bit of data that I've archived since I started the plan, call logs, texts, pictures, emails, everything, and started making printouts. Folks, I must have spent over $1,500 on staple supplies. Printer ink, paper, binders, the works, and I cataloged everything in order from the beginning of the affair until the last bit 2 weeks ago, December 16th. All into the binders, 14 of them. I then put each one in a box and gift wrap each, addressing them to various people. My mother, my father had passed away 7 years ago, her parents, her two sisters, her brother, her HR department. Did I forget to mention that POS works for the same company and there's an expressed rule against intercompany relationships because of the nature of what she does? Several of her friends, POS and POS's parents, lugged all of those things to the post office and shipped them all out December 16th, ETA for delivery December 22nd to 24th. Perfect. So now we're at Christmas Eve. Sue comes home around the usual time. No idea if she'd seen POS. I'd stopped tracking her on the app the 18th. I figure I'd gotten all the mileage I needed from it. As per usual, she showers, hangs out with me for a bit. I blow her back out on the living room couch. I know, I'm a jerk. And she turns in for the night. The final phase was upon me at long last. The nuke I've been arming since June was finally about to be launched. In the middle of the night, I woke up and wrapped 3 of the remaining binders with the divorce papers taped to the inside cover and set it on my side of the bed with a note that said Merry Christmas on it. Next to it, I left my old phone and the business card of my lawyer. I packed up the remainder of my most needed items, enough to fill 2 backpacks, and I left my home that I spent 23 years in for the last time. That, my friends, was 1 week ago. To Sue, I am completely off the grid, gone, shadow ghosted. She's blocked on Facebook, but hasn't blocked me for some reason, so I'm keeping tabs on the fallout fallout. It's absolutely glorious. My packages have reached everyone I sent them out to, and Sue is getting crucified. Her youngest sister completely dressed her down. Both of her parents have condemned her. My mom absolutely destroyed her. Like, holy smokes. I know my mom has a mean streak, but the things she called Sue were unholy. She's been frantically trying to find out if anyone knows where I am, but those that do aren't saying a word. All over her Facebook feed, she's desperately trying to reach me because I'm guessing she knows I'm likely looking. But I'm not saying a word to her without my lawyer present. That'll be the next time I share oxygen with her. She's got no way of spinning the narrative to paint me as the bad guy because I've exposed her to everyone who matters to her. And from what a mutual friend who works in the same company as her told me, she and POS apparently are being put on administrative leave as of tomorrow. So yeah, chances are she'll be going into the next year unemployed. As for the final two binders, well, one has been turned over to my lawyer as my final bit of evidence for the impending divorce, and the last one I put in my storage unit to be burned in Joey's fire pit when the divorce is final. Do I feel guilty about this? No, not even in the slightest. 23 years I did right by this woman. I gave her the home she wanted. I gave her the family she wanted. I gave her the life I felt we both deserved, and I loved her unconditionally. Never have I faltered. Never have I strayed. Never have I even entertained the notion of breaking my vows. When an issue came up that I felt was affecting our marriage, I came to her and told her, and we sorted out best we could. She opted to find comfort in another man's bed, rather than come to me and say that she was unhappy with our bedroom life at the time. She decided to step out with a young punk who gave her the tingles. So no, I have no sympathy for what I did, or for her. She can burn in hell for all I care. The most I stand to lose is my house, a car, and maybe a couple $100 a month in alimony. But seeing as the divorce is filed under the statute of adultery and New York State is an at-fault state, that might end up getting waived with the insurmountable amount of evidence I've provided. As far as I'm concerned, she's dead to me and I'm never looking back. So am I the jerk? Jumping into the future, there is an update. Christmas Day was the first full day I spent in my new apartment. It's still a work in progress as I have more stuff I want to get, but overall I've made it my home, since I'm going to be here for at least 2 years. My boys and the eldest girlfriend came over and spent a good portion of the day with me. The girlfriend brought over treats she'd made and also whipped up a really nice meal. I got to sit and talk with my sons in a way that I hadn't done in a really long time, and it was nice. My big sister also came over with more goodies and hung out with us also. It'd been the first time she'd seen her nephews in nearly a year. Having all of them around did me some real good. As if I were by myself, I think I would have just drank myself into a stupor. Everyone cleared out around 8ish and I decided I wanted to go hang out with Joey and his wife Claudia. Hung out with them for a couple of hours, had a couple drinks, and then went back home. The next big development that happened was last week. Around midday, I get a text from Nina asking if I was busy that night. I of course wasn't, so we agreed to meet up after I got off of work. She shows up and we go to a dinner not far from where I work. Here in New York City, we're doing indoor dining at 25% capacity thanks to the Rona, but there's mostly no trouble getting seats because so many of us opt not to dine out as much these days regardless. So after we're seated and order our food, Nina pretty much lays all of her cards on the table, and honestly, I knew this was coming. She basically confessed that she's liked me all the way back since we were teenagers, but never got the chance to tell me since Sue swooped in and scooped me up before she could. For context, I've known Nina longer than Sue by 2 years. As I mentioned, she's been on the fourth point of my social square of myself, Oz, and Joey. We were the social outcasts in high school, the raver kids who didn't fit into all of the other cliques. Back then, Nina had a weight problem and was diabetic. She was the heavy-set goth chick who was super cool but no guy would ever give a second glance at. But we always had chemistry. These days, Nina is a personal trainer and a yoga instructor. She was the ugly duckling who grew up into one hell of a beautiful swan, if I must say. Long story short, we decided that upon the finalization of my divorce, we are going to start seeing each other. And yeah, I slept with her that night. Took her back to my new pad and we had a grand old time. Am I ashamed of sleeping with her? Heck no. Nina's been a better friend to me than Sue ever was. That's not saying Sue wasn't my best friend, but through near a quarter of a century I've known Nina, she's always supported me. Even so much as I learned that day, willingly taking a step back from her own feelings to allow me to pursue and eventually start a life with Sue. That resonated with me on a level I didn't think it would. That kind of selflessness towards another person is the definition of real love. I know. know. It sounds like I'm just trying to justify in my head that sleeping with her was the right decision. To me, it was. And I plan on exploring what's to come with Nina and I with total commitment. Okay, on to yesterday, the day I met my wife and her lawyer to discuss the divorce. It's now been 2 weeks since I ghosted my soon-to-be ex-wife. This past Monday, I got a phone call that Sue's attorney had scheduled a meeting for us to discuss the terms of our divorce, which was yesterday. I met with him Tuesday morning to discuss the terms I'm wanting. Long story short, it's an uncontested divorce under the grounds of marital neglect from Sue. My terms are full division of assets and me selling my half of the house ownership to her. She can have it. We keep our respective vehicles, I keep my cabin, and under the pretense of marital neglect, she gets no spousal support from me. As for 17, which is what I'll refer to my son as from here on, he's free to choose who he wants to reside with following the divorce, which will most likely be me. So Wednesday comes and I show up to my lawyer's office dressed in my Johnny Cash best. My wife and her lawyer, she looks like crap, barely holding it together. I give the stone face. I won't bore you with the lawyer babble, but her lawyer presented an offer for terms of reconciliation. I shot them down almost as soon as she finished listing the details of the request. Like I said, I'll spare you all the details of the meeting. Long story short, we agreed to a legal separation leading to an uncontested divorce. The only revision is that I will pay her $653 a month of temporary spousal support to cover the cost of utilities until she's gainfully employed again. Yep, she got fired for doing POS. He got canned as well. Up to a full year after the finalization. I make enough that it won't hurt me financially even if she drags her feet finding a new job. And she's got enough in her savings to live off of for quite some time. Once a full calendar year has passed after the finalization date of the divorce, she's on her own. A small price to pay to be rid of her and her cheating. It'll take roughly 3 months for things to go through, so early April if there's no lockups, I'll be free of her. So after the meeting, my lawyer gives me some final words before telling me he'll be in touch to update me on the progress of the filing. Back out on the street, Sue chases me down and asks if we can talk. I figured I'd at least give her that. She held it together fairly well in the meeting, but outside let the waterworks flow, saying how sorry she was and how she never meant for it to go as far as it did. She says she never expected to fall in love with POS, but knew when she thought I was cheating how wrong it was to betray her own husband in such a way. She asked if I could ever find it in my heart to forgive me, and that maybe in a few years we could try to start over, that she can't imagine what her life is going to be without me. I tell her start imagining it soon because this will be the last time I ever speak to or see her. I tell her that 17 is almost a man and old enough to make his own choices as to his own future. I say that I gave her half of my life and every ounce of love that I had unconditionally, and she, in her own words, fell in love with another man, that there is absolutely no chance of me forgiving her, that all the love I had for her was slowly killed all of those months when she confided and professed her love to POS rather than coming to me and telling me she had any issues with how things were going with us. I told her I loved who she once was, but I hate who stands before me, and that if I never see her again, it'll be too soon. Here we are on the sidewalk in Midtown Manhattan, her making a scene, crying her eyes out. A couple of folks walk by and give side glances, but at that point, I didn't care. I wasn't about to publicly humiliate her. I pretty much already socially and professionally destroyed her, but I needed to get the last bit of emotion I had for her out. I finished by telling her that I didn't regret the 23 years I spent being her husband. I regretted that in 23 years, she decided the easy way out was the better option, and that for 23 years I thought she was mine, but it turned out it was just my turn. I put in my Raycons, turned around, and walked away. Later that night, her father calls me and apologizes. He praises me for always being a good man to his daughter, and tells me that he's ashamed of her and that he raised her better than what she did. I'm not gonna lie, I'm gonna miss the old man. My dad died years ago, so he's always been my default father figure since, but I can't see myself maintaining a relationship with anyone on her side of the family. After that call, I went on Facebook and symbolically changed my relationship status to divorced. Yeah, it's not final yet, but in my eyes, it's over and done. Like I said, when I make a post on Facebook, it's an event, so plenty of folks started hitting me up over Messenger asking me questions. questions, and I laid it all out. And I laid it all out that I filed for divorce with Sue earlier in the day. Of course, Nina called me, shocked that I had pulled the trigger so fast. Obviously, I was already in the process of it when we spoke, but she had no way of knowing how far it was along. I asked her if she could come over, and of course, she comes a running. We knocked boots again, but this time, she stayed the night. We laid in my bed and talked until the wee hours in the morning. And I haven't felt this level of relief and connection in a really long time. Nina gets me, and I can't get enough being around her. Since the day she confided in me, she's all that's been on my mind. Yeah, I know, some folks are gonna say it's messed up that I moved on so fast, but as far as I'm concerned, my marriage ended the day POS let Sue touch his pecker, so I'm about due. So yeah, that's it. That's the end. My divorce is in the works and I'm moving on to start a relationship with Nina. I know in a common response to someone I said I'd probably never marry again, but that was before Nina came clean to me about how she felt towards me, and I can't deny that I feel the same. We're gonna take it slow, and we're not announcing anything until the divorce with Sue is legal and official. As for Sue, I couldn't give a care what happens to her. She could move POS into our old home for all I care. I'll be getting my money for the house over the course of the next year in 4 quarterly installments, and aside from the $653 I will pay out directly to her savings account monthly, I never have to see or speak to her again. Jumping into the future, there is an update. My soon-to-be ex-wife of 23 years just tried to end it last night. The quick version of the backstory is I discovered my wife of 23 years was having an affair with a 27-year-old coworker. We have 2 sons, 22 and 17. I concocted a plan to completely upend her life, centered around fooling her into thinking that I was having an affair myself. I kept the ruse going for over 4.5 months while compiling evidence of her infidelity, as well as securing divorce papers and planning my exit strategies, slowly moving my personal belongings from our home to a new apartment, getting a new phone and number, separating my half of our shared income from our joint account, etc. I gathered every bit of proof about her affair, compiled it, printed it all out from the very start of that week, filed it into 14 binders, packed 11 into gift wrap boxes, and mailed them to the most important people in her life, as well as her HR apartment, so that they would all arrive on Christmas Eve. While she slept, I took one of the remaining 3 binders and did the same. Only this one, I taped the divorce notice to the inside cover and left it on my side of the bed, which, mind you, she's had her lover in a number of times, along with my old phone and my lawyer's business card, and then shadow ghosted her. Then we went through all the divorce proceedings. This brings us to last night. As only my closest friends, 2 sons, older sister, and mother have my new contact information, I've completely blocked my soon-to-be ex-wife on all social outlets, so she has no means of reaching me since I left her on Christmas Eve, but some of our mutual friends still do. Last night I'm hanging out in my apartment and I get a voice call notification on Messenger from one of said friends, one of the few who hadn't abandoned her following me outing her affair. She didn't waste any time when I answered and said she had went to check on Sue, my soon-to-be ex-wife, and found her passed out in the bedroom, foaming out of the mouth with 2 bottles of empty pills next to her. She's in the ICU in critical but stable condition. The doctor said that she will likely pull through, but she's clearly not going to be well after. She begged and pleaded for me to come. Her parents and 2 of her sisters were also there at the hospital. My guess is they were notified after the hospital attempted to notify me, but Sue would still have my old number as her emergency contact. I simply told her no. Sue was not my problem anymore. She had clearly decided she wanted to take the easy way out rather than deal with the shame and agony of the 23-year marriage she blew up. I then told her friend that if Sue's family were there, they could help her sort out the pieces, but as far as Sue and I are concerned, there is no Sue and I anymore. I then ended the call. I've had a few hours to sleep on it, and my sons called me this morning asking if I knew. I told them yes, but I also let them know that if they want to be there and be supportive of their mother, I will not hold it against them or judge them for it. She is their mother after all, but I myself wash my hands of her and care little to nothing about what she does for or to herself anymore. They were both a little taken back by this, but respected my stance. However, now that the news has broken about her attempt, many of those friends who dropped her were all starting to surface again and saying that I needed to be there for her, that even despite what she did to me, I need to support her in her time of need. I've also been informed that her affair partner tried to visit her this morning but wasn't allowed because he's not family. I'm getting dogpiled on to go see her, but I feel nothing for this woman anymore. I haven't for a very long time. I checked out during the process of getting my payback for her betrayal, and I stand by the fact that I don't care at all for what she's done. In fact, it makes me hate her even more. She's the one who was unfaithful. She's the one who, through a year-long fling with a guy 5 years older than her oldest son, was worth destroying 23 years. And now that she has to face the consequences of her choices, she chooses the most selfish way to deal with it. Even now, seeing as she is in all likelihood going to to survive, she's cultivated immediate sympathy from everyone who took her to task, and I'm being made out to look like the jaded ex-husband, unwilling to sympathize for her by most of her family. Not her dad. He's reached out to me over the last few hours and said he respects my decision to stay away. It's like I never even truly knew this woman. 23 years and it comes down to this. Yes, I know the way I broke things off with her may have put her in a poor mental state, but now a whole new can of worms has been opened up because either she had a complete mental breakdown and decided to self-delete herself, or she made an extremely risky and calculated move to cull favor back from people who just weeks prior condemned her for betraying me. She cheated on me and now she's the victim? Sorry if this comes off as rantish, but I'm here trying to wrap my brain around this. I want to be perfectly clear. I am not going to visit Sue. She waived her right to me caring about her well-being the day that she let POS put his worm inside of her. This might come off as heartless because despite the cool, calm, collected way I've been throughout my whole ordeal, my feelings are still very much raw, but I don't care about this woman. I haven't for a long time. I'm aware that I'm going to be vilified by a number of folk here. I don't much give a care. Think of me however you want. If you were in my shoes, you'd see her actions vastly different. Some of you folks are going to look up my history and see the story of what I did to her, and you're going to draw the conclusion that this was all my fault. That me tormenting her for all of those months, fooling her into thinking that I was cheating on her while she actively cheated on me, then destroying her socially and professionally as a result was the catalyst for her meltdown. Maybe it was. Maybe I'm a heartless sociopath. But as Arthur Fleck so famously said, you get what you deserve. I gave this woman half of my life and did absolutely everything to be the best possible husband she could ever have. By her own admission, I had no bearing in her decision to step outside of our marriage. She did it, quote, for her. Her selfishness knows no bounds, and I'm glad to be rid of her. If it makes me the bad guy because I will not go in and see her and never plan on interacting with her ever again, so be it. I hold true to my convictions. She made the choice to betray me. She made the choice to put her needs above the needs of our marriage. So now it's my turn to choose me over everything else. She can rot in the darkest pit of hell for all I care. Let everyone else help fix her. My obligation to ever care about her well-being ended the day we signed the separation agreement. I just needed to get this off my chest. If you're gonna cast judgment on me for feeling how I feel, save it. Like I said above, after 23 years and 2 children, I never really knew this woman at all. I have no sympathy for her and I never will. Let her rot. And jumping into the future, there is one final update. I've been informed by Sue's dad that she's been moved from the ICU to the mental health wing. Doctors are still monitoring her mental state. She's conscious and cognitive again, but obviously lethargic. Her father told me she asked if I came to see her and he said no, and she shut down after. He respectfully said any further news he'll share only if I inquire, because he understands the headspace I'm in. Also, I've scheduled counseling for 17. The first consultation is coming this Monday. So, am I the jerk? The way that the OP describes Sue at the end does make it sound like this was the second of his theories, that she calculated this whole thing as one way to get him back into her life, because as she said herself, she can't imagine life without him. You can never really know what somebody's motivation for doing something like this is, but I can't possibly believe that she believes that doing this would somehow make him come to her and forgive her for everything that she did to him, which is why I think that's most likely not the real reason she did this, unless she is just totally delusional or doesn't understand the depths of the OP's anger and pain from this whole situation. And going back to the original way this whole story was described, part of his main plan was to try and make it seem like he was the one cheating in order to plant the seeds of mistrust or dissonance between POS and Sue. But even after all of that planning, all of that setup, in the end, it sounds like POS still wants to be with Sue despite all of OP's efforts. Him showing up to the hospital after all this doesn't necessarily say that, but the part where he goes full novella on her and tells her that he's in love with her and he has to be with her and all of that, even after all of the OP's plans were already in motion, does make it seem like that. So there's a chance that she ends up with them in the end anyway. The OP makes it pretty clear that he doesn't care anymore, even if she moved POS into their old house. So now that you know everything, was the revenge justified or was it going too far, and jerk or not a jerk, and why? I found out my sister has been doing my boyfriend behind my back. So I get even. A little backstory first. I was born into a broken family. My father was an addict. My mother, on the other hand, was the kindest, strongest woman I know. Fortunately, they separated just after the birth of my youngest sister, who was only younger than me by a year. I took after my mother. My sister, though, apart from my mother's looks, she got everything else from dad. Now the thing is, my father was a horrible person. Even before he became an addict, he was an arrogant, selfish, insufferable jerk. And not only that, he cheated on my mother multiple times while she was pregnant with me and my sister, and he also physically hurt her. He was so horrible to the point that when he left, my mother said that it was the happiest day of her life. She continued raising us all by herself while my dad went to God knows where. And you know what? I have never even missed him. 18 years later, and me and my sister are all grown up. And the thing is, we've never really been that close. We fought a lot when we were younger, but it was all usual sibling fights. As we grew, we fought less and less, and we were able to coexist like all siblings do. Though I didn't express it all the time, I did love her. Here's where it all goes haywire. In my senior year of high school, I started dating one of my classmates. He had just transferred during that year and said that he liked me immediately and asked me to go out with him if I was interested. I gave the guy a chance. It goes extremely well, and just 2 months later, we were officially dating. He was sweet, would treat me to lunch, take me to places, and was just a great boyfriend overall. We continued to date through our first and second year of college, and he comes over to our house pretty frequently. Even my mom lets him stay the night. It came to the point that he would come there even when I wasn't there, and I thought nothing of it. I was even glad that he felt so comfortable there, until one day, just a month before our anniversary, I texted him that I would be home later than usual because I still had something to do in school. I was already in my third year and I was busier than I ever was before. Since we usually go home together, he asked me what time I think I'll be home, and I said probably after dinner, so he can pick me up then. He says, okay. Fortunately though, I managed to finish earlier than I thought, and instead of texting him to pick me up, I decided to surprise him by coming to his house since it's been a while since we spent time together and I missed him. When I got there, his sister, who I was very close with, was visibly confused and immediately asked me what I was doing there. I told her I was there to see her brother, and she becomes even more confused and says, he told me he was coming to your house to see you though. He left hours ago. This time, I'm the one who's confused, and so I quickly turned around and went home. Thankfully, our houses were only 15 minutes apart from each other, so I got there quickly. The next 20 minutes were like hell. I come home to find his bike outside. The house was dark and I tried my best to go inside as quietly as I could. By the time I got up the stairs, I hear it. Moans. Female and male. The male one sounding particularly like my boyfriend. Tears immediately flooded my eyes. I didn't even need to see it to know it was him. My boyfriend of almost 3 years doing my sister. My feet suddenly had a mind of their own and I yanked the door open. I was seething at this point, and that bee was riding him like a mechanical bull. I stood there as my now ex pushes her off of him, shocked as he puts his clothes back on at the speed of light and starts spewing excuses. I wasn't listening at all. I was sobbing so much I couldn't breathe. The jerk follows me all the way downstairs, and I yell at him that if he doesn't leave that instant, I would tell his entire family. He leaves, and I was left with my sister. I couldn't even look at her. I stayed downstairs calming myself down until my mom came home from work. She immediately notices something is wrong, but I don't tell her yet. Dinner starts and I feel like crying again. And you know what's even worse? When my sister came down and sat just across from me, I saw no hints of remorse or guilt on her face. Absolutely none. I felt sick. I wanted to vomit, and I swear that at some point during dinner, the evil bee even smirked. A week goes by and I don't say anything. I was so hurt. My ex wasn't saying anything either. No phone calls, no texts, nothing. And my sister was the same. Not a single sorry. I felt so defeated. I was crying multiple times a day and I couldn't even focus in school. One day I finally snap and I tell my mother everything. She was extremely disappointed. She scolds my sister, but she didn't even seem to care. Then suddenly I remembered my ex had told me his passwords. He had told me me early in our relationship and I never bothered to open them because I was never the type to go through my significant other's messages. I trusted this guy, and this is what I get. Anyway, I managed to open his messenger accounts, and there I see hundreds of messages between him and my sister. I felt weak in the knees. It had been going on for almost 4 months then. I took screenshots. It turns out they had been going out while I would be at school. All three of us were from different schools. My sister couldn't get into mine because her grades were too low, and so were my boyfriends. My pain quickly turned into anger, and I wanted nothing more than to make them both pay. I couldn't stomach the sight of my sister. The fact that she would go behind my back like that over some guy made me sick. We were supposed to always be there for each other. After a month, I asked my mother if I could just move out and live with my aunt for a while because I just couldn't take it anymore. She was sad, but she understood. I felt so sorry for her. She held my sister accountable for what she did, but at the end of the day, she was still her daughter, so she couldn't completely turn her back on her. I didn't want to give her the burden of having to choose, so I did instead. So I moved out and lived with my aunt and promised to keep in touch. The next 6 months were basically me putting my life back together. I became a working student and did some freelance work to earn some money. And as I started to earn more, I dropped out of school completely and became a full-time freelancer. As the months went by, I would earn more and more, and I had more than enough money to spend for myself. And from then on, I started to send money to my mom monthly. One day, I got curious and decided to check on my sister and my ex. When I unblocked them, I regretted it instantly. The jerks were still together, and my sister was even flaunting their relationship on Instagram. Suddenly, it's as if no time had passed by at all, and I was angry yet again. I scrolled through more pictures, and it was obvious that my sister was completely in love with him. I acted on anger. I sent the screenshots I took from before and sent it to our cousins and told them everything. They all ended up hating her. And then I sent it to my ex's sister and told her everything. She punched him and tells their parents, and a day later I receive a text from them apologizing on behalf of their son. It made me feel slightly better. A week later, my mom asks me to come home and spend the weekend there. I decided to say yes this time. I stopped by a mall on the way to get a gift for my mom, and guess who I see? My ex-boyfriend with a girl who wasn't my sister, holding hands. I laugh hard. The urge to take out my phone and take a picture to send it to my sister was so strong, but I stopped myself. It wouldn't be painful enough. So I hide where he can't see me and follow them. After about an hour, she goes to the bathroom. I follow her there. I approach her when she comes out of the cubicle and say, "Is the guy you're with your boyfriend?" She looked a little bit scared and confused, but she answers, "Yes." Nonetheless, I quickly tell her that the same guy is currently dating my sister and even showed her some pictures. The girl was completely horrified. She said she had no idea he was seeing someone else, and I fought the urge to laugh. I tell her to get rid of him quickly, and I'll tell her everything she needed to know, but also asked her not to dump him yet. So she makes up some excuse to him about an emergency at home, and they go their separate ways for the day. We meet up at a coffee shop close to the mall afterwards. There I spill everything, including all the details about the cheating. When I finished, she looked so mad, almost as if it happened to her, and then she goes on to reveal that a longtime boyfriend of hers actually cheated on her as well. We talked some more, and as time passed by, I came to discover that the girl was actually really sweet, and I felt sorry that she became a victim of my ex as well. She asked me if I was going to get revenge, and I said yes, but I needed her help. I also told her she could say no if she didn't want to, but she said she wanted to help, so I told her my plan, and she was all for it. I came home that night excited. My mom seemed pleased, and my sister looked a little pissed. I didn't give a care though, since I had the knowledge that my ex-boyfriend, the guy she destroyed our relationship for, was on his way to destroy her. The girl and I talked for the next 3 weeks that I was there, and she would send me screenshots of her and my ex's conversations, also pictures of them together. We continued to talk even after I came back to my aunt's house, and exactly 2 months after we met, the plan was finally in action. It was a week before my sister sister and my ex's anniversary. Yes, they had an anniversary, and I was about to give her the greatest gift. By that time, my ex had confessed to the other girl about his relationship with my sister, but she told him that it was okay and that they could still be together because she didn't care. Little did he know, her and I were basically best friends now and had come up with a master plan to ruin his life. I come home again and spent the week there leading up to their anniversary. It was the longest week of my life. The day finally comes, and after my sister leaves to go to his house, I wait a few hours. Then I FaceTime his sister to ask if the two jerks were home. She says yes, then I send it. Dozens of pictures of my ex with the other girl and screenshots of their conversations. One where he was telling her about how much he loves her and how he's planning to leave my sister for her soon. There was one where he even expressed how annoying he found her and that sometimes he wants to, quote, strangle her. A whole bunch of other screenshots where he insults her, calls her stupid, desperate, and many more. He also says that she was awful in bed and way too noisy and that he barely touched her the past few days. Ouch. But it wasn't enough for me. The final touch was a 3-minute long video of my friend and my ex doing it. Yes, she did give me her full consent to send it. She was on top, exactly how I found my sister and my ex before, and she was writing him into oblivion. But I cropped it so her face wasn't shown, but my ex's face was in full view. It was hilarious. The jerk was enjoying it so much, and I know my sister would probably have a seizure once she watches it. Afterwards, I wait. I was still on FaceTime with his sister, and after a while, I hear it. Screaming. Objects being thrown. More screaming. His sister comes upstairs to check on them, and I hear everything. My sister was sobbing, and what's even more messed up is that my ex didn't even try to deny any of it, and he asked her to just leave. His sister and I talk some more, and she tells me how she's never liked my sister, and her parents never did either. They said that they would ignore her whenever she would come by at their house. They would even ask about me sometimes just to piss her off. After about an hour, my sister finally comes home, and I sat there grinning like a devil as she steps into the living room, face puffy from crying. We make eye contact, and I smirk at her, and I said, "You deserve it," before going upstairs. I don't speak to her again for days, and she refused to even leave her room. The satisfaction I felt was through the roof, and I even told my mom that I could move back in now. But it didn't end there, because my ex had gotten my sister pregnant. A huge part of me wasn't shocked, but my mom, of course, was disappointed. We had to tell the rest of our family, and they were all disappointed with her as well. Before she gave birth, my sister told my mom she was going to move in with my ex's family since they have to take care of their baby, and my mom refused to let him step foot in our house again. But since our houses were really close to each other, she agreed. It was pathetic. It was obvious that she still wanted to be with him even after everything he did, but hey, it wasn't my problem anymore. But according to my ex's sister though, her parents weren't too happy about the whole thing, and although my ex said he would take the responsibility of his child, he didn't want anything to do with my sister anymore. Total jerk. So I continued to live my life, working, going out, and focusing on becoming even better. It didn't take long for me to finally be happy again, and all the pain and betrayal I felt was like a distant memory. I reconnected with my old friends and even started dating again. I also kept in touch with the girl who helped me with my revenge. She, of course, has dumped my ex, broke up with him just the day after it all went down, and we're genuinely good friends now, and we meet when we can. I don't keep in touch with my sister at all, but according to my ex's sister, she is absolutely miserable because she had to drop out of school, and my ex barely spoke to her and would always be gone, sometimes for days, and he even brought home girls on multiple occasions and did them in that same house that my sister was pregnant in. He also wasn't even there when she gave birth. I didn't feel sorry for her at all since she chose to stay with him, but I did feel sorry for the kid for having those two jerks as his parents. They would go to our house at least 3 times a week to see my mother, and my sister would completely ignore my existence. Guess what? That bee still hasn't apologized. I didn't really care at that point, so I ignored it. But one time, I kindly offered to buy her baby some clothes, and she fixed me with the nastiest look before saying,
"We don't need your freaking money."
I was appalled, and then I was pissed again. Alright then, if that's how she wants to play. Funnily enough, I run into my ex at a bar just a couple of days later. He looks terrible, and I questioned what I even saw in him. He sees me and actually looks happy. I, on the other hand, no longer felt anything for him, only disgust. He tries to make conversation, telling me that I look great and even apologizes. I was shocked, but his apology didn't really mean anything to me anymore. Later that night, I received a bunch of messages from him. He was apologizing again, and then went on to say how much he regrets cheating on me before begging for another chance and swears that this time things would be different and that he was going to change for me. I laugh so hard that I fall off my bed. The ocean would dry up before I'll even think of taking him back. But since my sister pissed me off once again and I was feeling a little petty, I sent her the screenshots of those messages with the caption, "This your baby daddy?" I knew she was still in love with him even after everything, and I knew that it would hurt for her to see how he's willing to change for me, but not for her, the mother of his child. He barely even gave her money for their child. It was only my ex's parents and my mom who supported her financially. She blocked me. And no, I don't ever take my ex back. Last I heard, he started using illegal substances. Fast forward to now, I continue to thrive while she continues to be miserable. We recently had a family reunion, and at one point, she says to our relatives that she's having a hard time, and one of our cousins looks at her dead in the eyes and says, "Well, maybe if you didn't do your sister's boyfriend, you wouldn't be in this position." She was absolutely dumbfounded, and there were tears in her eyes. I almost choked on my wine to keep from laughing. She probably didn't think that they knew. Well, now she does. And they all didn't bother to hide how much they despised her. She had no one on her side and was considered the disappointment of the family, but she only had herself to blame. By the way, if anyone is confused why we still live with our parents during college, I am Filipina, and this happened in the Philippines. Here, we don't move out until we have kids, and sometimes not even then. Some people don't believe, and honestly, I understand. I wish it was fake, truly. This particular event has caused so much stress on our entire family, but I do get some of y'all. About the girl who helped me, I was actually really shocked myself with how willing she was to participate. There definitely had been times where I was scared she would out me to my ex and my sister, but I guess it all just reminded her of her situation with her ex, and she also seemed mad about being made into a side chick. I didn't expect that she would send a video. I asked her so many times if she was sure. My ex was a horrible person, but he was attractive and good at friskiness, as much as I hate to admit. She basically used him for doing the deed, and I don't find anything wrong with that. He deserved it. And to be honest, I would have done the same if it was the other way around. I get why it might seem made up, but I had a friend who got sent a video of her then boyfriend and another girl doing it as well. The girl sent it because she wanted her boyfriend to herself. It happens more frequently than one might think. Bees can be messy these days, but again, I get why it might seem unbelievable. Believe what you want, it's not like it would affect any of us negatively. What's done is done. So with all that said, am I the jerk? In this type of situation, the person you're dating can do whatever they want and it can hurt you to a certain degree, but to have your own family, your sister, do this to you is something that will probably drastically change your life from that point forward. Your relationship with the rest of your family, how you think about things in general. If that's not a sacred relationship, then what is? The sister here obviously receives a heavy dose of karma for what she did to the OP, but really, what will ever make their relationship normal again? Probably nothing. I mean, over time, it might hurt less, but even then, 30 years in the future, you're always going to remember that this thing happened. It wasn't an accident. She chose to do this with her current boyfriend. And the fact that the sister still refuses to apologize is very strange. She obviously can't deny that this all happened because the OP witnessed it happening. So rather than taking ownership for it and saying, "Hey, I did this, I'm sorry," and trying to pretend like you care about the relationship with your own sister, she just doesn't even acknowledge it at all, even after all of this. That's sad. And lastly, the fact that the ex wants to get back with the OP, which would obviously lead to the situation where the OP is raising the baby of her sister from when her boyfriend cheated on her. One of the top responses made a joke saying, "What kid wouldn't want to be raised by Uncle Daddy and Auntie Mommy? And if they had a kid, they would be half siblings / half cousins." Anyway, let me know what you think of this whole situation. Did the revenge go too far? What would you have done? And jerk or not a jerk, and why? A Karen in a Walmart thinks that I work there and screams at me for poor customer service. But I'm 12 and I don't work here, lady. She doesn't want to understand that, so here's what happened. Subscribe to Am I the Jerk on YouTube and hit the bell to turn on notifications. When this story happened, I was 12. Basically, I was a tiny child, always have been. Back then, I looked like I was 11 or so. I'm not sure why this woman thought that I worked at Walmart, but I think she needs to get her eyes checked because in no way, shape, or form did I look like I was old enough to begin working. To this day, I still don't understand what made made me look like I was working at Walmart. But maybe telling this story will make other people understand where she is coming from because I don't. Here's the situation. I was at Walmart alone because I was buying my dad a birthday present and he had driven me there. In fact, he was waiting outside. My parents had always made sure that I learned to keep myself safe, and so far I had done a great job at that. So I'm in the card aisle and I see a whole mess of cards that are very out of order, if that makes any sense. Me being the perfectionist that I am, I decide to rearrange them so they at least look like they're in order. But unfortunately, I hear that sound that we all know. At first, I didn't think anybody was talking to me because why would anyone be talking to me? But once I turn around, I see a woman that looks fairly short with the classic Karen haircut staring straight at me. At first, I think that I'm just in her way and I simply just apologize and move out of the way. I'm sorry, ma'am. And I continue to search for a good card for my father's birthday. Then she scoffs at me as if I just offended her family.
Well, aren't you gonna help me?
Pardon?
Obviously, I don't know where I am, so just show me where the baby diapers are now.
Now, I know exactly where everything is in this Walmart, but I don't want to walk around the store with a woman I don't know. I'm sorry, I don't work here, therefore I can't help you.
You Walmart workers are all the same, aren't you? I want to speak to your manager.
At this point, I'm confused as to why she isn't getting the message, and like I said before, I look way too young to be working here. Ma'am, I don't work here. Please leave me alone. I'm getting uncomfortable. As I turn to leave, she grabs me, spins me around, crouches down, and yells at me for not showing her where the diapers are.
Don't you dare walk away from a paying customer.
At this point, I am literally shaking and on the verge of tears because I've never been harassed by an adult before. An employee hears the screaming and runs over to see this woman practically holding me hostage while screaming at me. The employee removes her hands from me and asks me if I know her. No, I'm just here to get a present for my dad. Okay, I'm gonna call the cops if you don't leave right now, he said, turning his attention to the woman.
I just don't understand why she won't direct me to the diapers.
Ma'am, this girl's about 11 years old, and she doesn't even look like she's an employee here. She's not even wearing the uniform. The woman abruptly walks out of the store. No more words are exchanged out of her. I thank the employee, grab a card I was looking at before she interrupted, paid, and walked out of the store praying she still wasn't out there. I told my dad what happened and he was furious. Neither one of us can understand how she thought I worked there. I never saw her again, and I hope it stays that way. What should I have done? The concept of the story started off sounding pretty funny because it was so absurd that somebody would mistake a kid who's not even in uniform as being an employee of Walmart just because they were organizing the cards. But then it kind of took a more serious turn than I expected. The Karen in this situation actually seemed more unhinged than I originally expected and was basically screaming at her in her face, grabbing her, which is taking it over the line. That's beyond a simple misunderstanding. And something's got to be seriously wrong if you think it's okay or normal to do this to a person in general, let alone a 12-year-old, to grab them because you think they're not giving you sufficient customer service. Hopefully one day they do find her so this doesn't happen to more people in the future. But let me know how you would have handled the situation down below. This is a military revenge story. A soldier wants out of the army. The commander agrees pending good behavior. The soldier messes around and ends up in the brig before getting kicked out. Back in my army days, I was once in command of a unit of about 80 soldiers in Hawaii. Most of the soldiers in my command were great people, happy to do their jobs and take home a paycheck. Hard workers, creative, adaptable to unusual army conditions, and generally reliable. But there was one who was trouble from the start. Gentle reader meets Private Wiggles. My first awareness of Wiggles came 2 or 3 days after I'd taken command of the unit. We're prepping for a month-long training exercise to Thailand, and Platoon Sergeant Maggie tells me Wiggles might not be able to go as she just had an outpatient medical procedure. Departure is about a week away, and I have to validate the personnel roster to make sure we've got logistical support for everyone we're bringing, transportation, food, lodging, etc. So I talk directly with Wiggles and ask if she's okay to travel and participate in the exercise. Wiggles says it's not a problem, she can handle it. We get to Thailand and set up camp on a Thai army base. 2 days in, and the medical section sends a runner to find me. Wiggles is at our medical clinic, tents with cots and surprisingly extensive medical supplies, laid out with extreme abdominal pain. I cruise over to the clinic tent, and the physician's assistant, PA, on duty, tells me a couple couple of things. Wiggles acknowledged recently having an abortion, the previously mentioned outpatient medical procedure, and the PA's examination, physician's assistant, and testing shows that Wiggles has the single worst case of pelvic inflammatory disease, PID, he's ever seen. Seriously, this Army PA who has seen all sorts of crazy stuff from soldiers was emphatically impressed by how bad it was. Wiggles developed PID from failing to get treatment for STI infections for a long time, as in she's almost glowing from it. No judgment on the abortion, not everyone is ready for kids, and the STI-induced PID can be treated with high-dose antibiotics, which the PA has on hand. Not a problem, we've got this covered. Wiggles is released to Sergeant Deb, her section sergeant, who will make sure Wiggles takes her antibiotics and keep an eye on her for any further issues. Sergeant Deb finds me and First Sergeant Bob about a day later and tells me two more things about Wiggles. She's refusing to take her antibiotics and she wants to get out of the Army. I again talk with Wiggles. So you want out of the Army? You know you have a couple of years left on your contract, right?
I know, but I'm just done being a soldier and I want to be out of the Army.
Okay, I can make that happen. You don't want to be here, then I don't want you to be here either. But here's the deal. You got to play by the rules. I can get you out with an honorable discharge and I'll start the paperwork as soon as we're back in Hawaii. But you need to take your antibiotics, do your job, and be where you're supposed to be. You do your part and I'll do my part for you. Sound good? Wiggles says,
Yep, I can do that.
Spoiler alert, she couldn't do that. For the rest of the Tylon exercise, Sergeant Deb had to take control of Wiggles' meds and force her to take them, when she actually found Wiggles, who consistently found someplace else to be. At one point in the next week or so, she accused First Sergeant Bob of doing the deed with her, easily disproven as he doesn't have any STIs and Wiggles has all of them. She was just trying to stir up trouble with wild accusations, I guess. We get back to Hawaii and I start the process to get her out of the Army, because as much as she's been a handful of trouble in Thailand, I'm thinking it's still easier at this point to kick her to the curb than it is to keep her around and punish her before kicking her out. I was wrong. Even as I start to work on her discharge, she ramps up the stupidity. Here are a few examples. Wiggles gets caught drinking at only 19. Wiggles and her husband lie to the on-base housing office and provide forged authorization documents to get into rent-free on-base housing that they didn't qualify for. Side note, Mr. Wiggles was no winner either. He was about to be dishonorably charged from his infantry unit for selling drugs to the other soldiers. Wiggles shows up at the infirmary to get medical treatment for facial bruising. Mr. Wiggles used his combat boots to kick her when Wiggles accused him of cheating on her. Wiggles refuses to show up for work or any unit formation and can't be found anywhere for days. Wiggles slashes all 4 tires on Mr. Wiggles' car, then attacks him with the knife when he confronts her. The military police are called, end up taking him in when Wiggles gives a sob story. But he's the one with the defensive wounds on his hands, not her. One of my male sergeants uses my open door policy to visit me one day, tells me he saw Wiggles stripping at one of the skank gear gentlemen's clubs down in Honolulu the night before, and she had also convinced one of our other female soldiers to come along with her to do the same. Here's a weird one. I get a call from a temp agency asking me if it's okay for Wiggles to continue working through them as an administrative assistant for clients in town. Not uncommon for soldiers to have a second job, but with everything else that she was up to at the time, this one just had me going, what the heck? There's more, but you get the idea. At this point, Wiggles' actions are egregious enough that I can no longer just kick her out with an honorable discharge. I put her on notice that she's at risk for a court-martial. I thought that threat might keep her in line, but she just couldn't seem to stop herself from getting stupider and stupider. It's the old 80-20 problem. 80% of your time is spent dealing with 20% of your folks who are troublemakers. At this point, I'm wasting a not insignificant amount of time dealing with Wiggles' issues almost daily. I had genuinely and in good faith offered her the easy path, but I guess she figured she'd try to burn the place down on the way out, since she apparently thought that she was getting what she wanted no matter what she did. I was reminded of what my old platoon sergeant used to say when I was coming up through the ranks. You want to get stupid? Go ahead, but I can get stupider. Cue the revenge. She's causing me daily headaches, so I'm going to bring the pain back to her. Honorable discharge paperwork is out the window, and I lean into the special court-martial process instead. My legal counsel tells me that Wiggles' activities are likely to get her a couple weeks confinement at most, maybe not even that. She may get a monetary fine, but she'll probably get an OTH other than honorable discharge, potential for a bad conduct discharge, which are worse. While her actions have not been that good, they are also not that bad. I'm rational enough to understand that. I have a brief chat with Captain Morgan, Wiggles' military defense attorney, about where I'm going with this case. During our chat, I tried to be a gentleman and let him know that Wiggles Wiggles is going to be trouble for him if he's not careful, he gives me a condescending, "This ain't my first rodeo, baka. I'm a big boy and I can take care of myself." Fair enough, I tried to warn you. Normally, a soldier getting a special court-martial for piddly squat might get confined to the barracks, restricted to their on-base quarters, or something similar for the duration of the process. It's not like she killed someone, right? However, my military legal counsel drops this little gem in my ear. He tells me that Wiggles has met all 5 of the conditions, danger to others, flight risk, etc., required by military law, Uniform Code of Military Justice, UCMJ, to warrant requesting confinement prior to her trial. He tells me, if you can remember these 5 conditions and elaborate on the details at our next pre-trial meeting with the military magistrate, you might be able to get her confined to the Navy brig at Ford Island until the trial. I'm a guy who likes to pay attention to sound legal advice, so I do just as he says. A couple days later, we go in for the pre-trial meeting and I run down the list for the magistrate. Boom. Magistrate orders Wiggles to be confined in the brig through her trial. First Sergeant Bob and Platoon Sergeant Maggie go to pick her up from her on-base housing. She won't open the door, but they know she's inside because they can clearly hear her and Mr. Wiggles banging away. This is important for later. The Wiggles finish up, she takes her time getting showered and dressed, and finally comes to the door when it pleases her. Off she goes to the brig. The pre-trial process takes up the next 4 weeks. During that time, I have to deal with Captain Morgan, the paralegals in his office, and various fun things to do with her pending court-martial. Other than that, it's blissfully peaceful. Wiggles chills in the brig for 4 weeks. Seriously, chills. Every time I had a visit, it was freezing in there. I'm required to make weekly welfare visits to see if she's being mistreated, if she has any needs that aren't being met, etc. It seems weird, but as her commander, I'm still responsible to make sure the brig staff aren't mistreating my soldier. Other going-ons in this time period include Mr. Wiggles fraudulently applies for a car loan and gets a van in their names. Mr. Wiggles is dishonorably discharged and kicked off the island, flies home to wherever he originally enlisted from. Captain Morgan asks me to consider an other than honorable discharge and time served in lieu of taking things all the way to trial. I'm hot to get that pound of flesh from her, but my legal counsel advises me to avoid the court-martial and just kick out Wiggles with the other than honorable discharge. After all, he says she's already been locked up for almost 3 weeks, so the magistrate will probably just give her time served and the other than honorable anyway. See my earlier comment about sound legal advice. My boss, Lieutenant Colonel Ryan, thinks I'm too invested in the case, that I'm no longer objective. Lieutenant Ryan insists on coming with me to the brig for the next welfare visit. This is 3 weeks into Wiggles' stay in those luxurious accommodations. Among other nonsense lines she throws at us, Wiggles tells us that she needs to see the dentist about a filling that's giving her trouble, and Motrin just isn't working. At the end of the visit, Lieutenant Colonel Ryan tells the guards about Wiggles' filling, asks if they can give her anything stronger than Motrin, then instructs them to follow up with the dentist. The guard actually laughs out loud at this and says, "No sir, Motrin is the best thing we can do in the brig. And the other thing, for the last 2 weeks, she's been telling anyone with ears that she wants to try getting her wisdom teeth pulled before she's kicked out. She doesn't have a problem with any fillings." It was hilarious to watch Lieutenant Colonel Ryan's face go from obvious concern for Wiggles' well-being to outright fury, and the next words out of his mouth were, "That bee lied to me." I make arrangements with Captain Morgan to accept his request for time served with an other than honorable in lieu of court-martial. Sometime later that week, I get a call from the brig. Wiggles is pregnant. Remember that scene in her house 4 weeks prior? And they can't keep her confined anymore because of it. She has to be released back to her unit until the court-martial or other actions are complete. Captain Morgan stakes his reputation on Wiggles being a good girl until we can send her back home to Carolina. He'll come to regret that, and he can't say that I didn't warn him. We get Wiggles back from her 4 weeks all-inclusive stay in the brig. I've accepted Captain Morgan's request to avoid the court-martial, and I confine Wiggles to the barracks under supervision for the 9 days she has left until her flight to Carolina. Immediately, we have another mess on our hands. Wiggles is smoking in the barracks. Not a big deal that she's smoking, it's just not allowed inside barrack rooms. Wiggles is caught with a bottle of hypnotic, a liquor, in the barrack rooms. She's still only 19. Wiggles slips out of the barracks and runs off for a day when her platoon sergeant gets distracted from supervising her. First Sergeant Bob and Lieutenant Ricky, the executive officer, go to collect Wiggles' belongings from her base housing so we can box it up and ship it to her home, and they find out that Mr. Wiggles has left behind a bunch of stuff he stole from other soldiers soldiers, body armor, military equipment, some ammunition, smoke grenades, and explosives that he stole during trips to the range, all lined up right inside the front door where it's impossible to miss. They call me asking what to do. I say, just collect it all, return the equipment to the central issue facility, and dump the ammo and explosives in the nearest amnesty box. Mr. Wiggles obviously meant for Wiggles to take the fall for having it. Husband of the year. If we take that bait, Wiggles will be here forever. I don't want that. Do you? Lieutenant Ricky says, nope, I don't want that either. It'll be like it never happened. In light of all this drama, I bring Wiggles into my office to remind her of her agreement to be a good girl until she leaves the island, with Lieutenant Ricky as a witness in the office to protect my butt. I say, Wiggles, you're in violation of your release agreement from the brig. You've been sneaking out of the barracks, you've been smoking, drinking. Wiggles cuts me off and says,
Yeah, I'm doing all kinds of drugs too.
she said with a heavily sarcastic voice. I tell her, be that as it may, I'm giving you fair warning that you're at risk of losing the deal I made with Captain Morgan. Additionally, you're pregnant again. I'm not sure if you're aware of it, but most of the damage to a fetus from alcohol and smoking will come in the first few weeks after conception. I don't know if you're planning to keep this one or not, but at the rate you're going, this baby's gonna be born dumber than you. Wiggles is speechless, gaping like a fish, and finally picks her jaw up off the floor. Wiggles then bolts out of my office and runs down to Lieutenant Colonel Ryan's office at the other end of the building to squeal on me for insulting her. Lieutenant Ricky is hot on her heels. She tries to rush into Lieutenant Colonel Ryan's office, but Lieutenant Ricky gets in first and fills him in. Lieutenant Ricky tells me later how it went down. Wiggles is yelling about how I called her stupid, a strangely vanilla thing for her to focus on considering everything she's done, but you do you, and that she's being mistreated. Lieutenant Colonel Ryan yells at his administrator to get Captain Morgan on the phone now. He reams Captain Morgan for his client's foolishness and tells him to fix this now, and makes various threats to Captain Morgan's career. About a half an hour later, I get a call from Captain Morgan. Captain Morgan says, baka baka baka. Yes, he did that whole patronizing thing. I can't believe the words I'm hearing from Wiggles. I'm shocked. I'm just shocked that you would use language like that and call her names. Side note, my mom is an attorney and I grew up with tales from the courthouse about lawyers using this exact sort of hyperbole. Your Honor, I am shocked. I am appalled and dismayed that the opposing counsel would attempt to paint my client in such a light. It's the kind of nonsense they said when they didn't have a good argument. So as soon as I hear the word shocked, I know I own him and immediately cut in. I say, and I bet you're appalled and dismayed too. Captain Morgan, stumbling and sounding slightly confused, says, well, yes, of course I am. You can't talk to soldiers like that. I know of a lieutenant colonel, a commander, who called one of her soldiers stupid, and she's no longer in command now. I didn't call her stupid. I informed her of basic biological facts. Not my problem if she takes the news poorly. And arguably, she's not all that smart. Anyway, you called me and I'm pretty sure it isn't to warn me about what I said to Wiggles. So what do you want? What will it take you to prevent you from kicking back our deal? Apparently, Lieutenant Colonel Ryan had cinched his butt up good and tight. You could get her on a plane tomorrow. How about if I get her out of here by Friday? It was Wednesday at the time and she was due to fly out the following Wednesday. I don't think you can manage that, but good on you if you do. To his credit, Captain Morgan gets Wiggles a flight for Sunday, 3 days early. I print up official orders appointing Lieutenant Ricky as a military escort specifically for her. Lieutenant Ricky drives her to the airport and the airline desk agent calls me to verify his status when they get to the check-in counter. They give him a special pass to get through security with her. He stays with her at the gate to make sure she gets on and stays on the plane, then stays at the gate until the plane is in the air. Some boogers are hard to flick. We wanted to make sure this one landed someplace else. About a month later, I get a call from the military police about a derelict van in the parking lot with all 4 tires slashed. Guess who it belonged to? It's really kind of sad when I look back on it. I had 2 other soldiers come to me at different points asking to get out of the army ahead of their contracts. One just didn't want to be in the army anymore. The other did want to stay in the army but had family issues that would be a lot easier to deal with as a civilian. They played by the rules and I got both of them out with honorable discharges and all the benefits. They even qualified for unemployment. Too easy. Wiggles could have had the same treatment. I told her exactly what I could do for her, then had to shift gears and told her what I was going to do to her. Then I did it. I could have been her best friend on the way out the door, but instead I ended up owning her and her dumb defense attorney. She ruined her chances of transition benefits and access to the VA, and picked up a lifelong black mark for employment, all because she couldn't play nice for a few weeks. She decided she wanted to play mess around games, and we all know what happened next. So, am I the jerk for how I handled this? There is a lot more leeway that they gave to her than I would have expected in this sort of military environment. It was almost like the equivalent of putting a kid in a timeout, but the kid keeps breaking out and you can't keep giving them punishments because the punishments don't mean anything to the kid. There was actually a good point somebody brought up in the responses saying, I'd bet there's a long history of illegal substance abuse and toxic relationships at play here. She's 19 years old, wrecked with untreated STDs, stripping, bruised up, framed for crimes by her husband, multiple unwanted pregnancies, etc. It kind of makes me wonder if her hubby's her pimp. That's exactly what it seems like. It seems like she's already gone through a lot of this, and she's acting more in a reactionary way than anything to the set of circumstances that may have been imposed on her from earlier in life, but also definitely from her husband. Just the fact that he was trying to set her up to get caught by putting all of those stolen things right in plain sight when they came in says a lot about the relationship. Like, he was trying to punish her here too. The OP actually responded to this and said, "This bothered me at the time and does to this day. I was genuinely confused by her response to my straightforward offer to get her out of the army. Easy peasy, no harm, no foul. I left a lot of detail out for the sake of brevity, but I really did try to help her understand that I would do right by her. She just couldn't/wouldn't accept it, and I was left with no other options. Military culture is vastly different than civilian culture. Action and response timelines are dramatically shortened. We just don't have time to deal with personal issues in a caring, coaching, mentoring way, especially if the owner of those personal issues is not willing or able to be an active participant in their resolution. It makes for a good revenge story, but it wasn't my preferred outcome. If I had my druthers, I'd have sent her home amicably." I'll note here that she did not go to the same location that her husband went to when he was discharged. So let me know how you see the situation down below. How do you think you would have handled it, and jerk or not a jerk, and why? My ex-wife lost a custody battle to me and then tried to pull off an elaborate plan to frame me for stealing from her and turn me into the police. But it all backfires on her. The first half of the story is the setup, everything that happened in the divorce, a whole glitter bomb situation, and the second half is where she framed me, how she did it, and what I did in response. Here's what happened. Subscribe to Am I the Jerk on YouTube and hit the bell to turn on notifications. I was married to a woman for 15 years and ended up divorcing her because she liked to sleep with other guys. While it took me 6 years to stumble onto this fact, she worked from home, I commuted 2 hours each way into the city, I owe it to her being either a sociopath or a narcissist, or both, why not? She absolutely could turn on and turn off the charm and could come up with lies staring at you right in the eyes. Hindsight is 2020. Let's call her V, short for Voldemort, as one time when I was talking about her after the separation, I referred to her as she who must not be named, and the nickname stuck with all my friends and family. During the marriage, my ex and I were best friends with another couple, and for this post we'll call them Sam and Marie. Sam was, and still is, my best friend. Marie was V's best friend. Marie had found out about V's plans to cheat on me prior to me finding out, and told V that she couldn't condone infidelity and their friendship would end if V did cheat on me. No, Marie did not tell me, and I don't blame her for not doing so. When I finally found out V was having a Facebook affair with some dude in California, we lived in Massachusetts, and if you're gonna have an online affair, don't do it while married to a computer expert. It was just 2 weeks before V was flying him out and putting him up in a hotel for 3 days. I spent those 2 weeks getting a lawyer, a private investigator, and my exit strategy together. I left her the weekend after their hotel stay. She would spend the days with him and come home for the afternoon and evening without a shred of guilt showing in her actions. The private investigator having gotten some pics and video of them leaving the hotel and eating lunch together and heading back to the hotel. I first stayed at Sam and Marie's in their in-laws' basement apartment, eventually moving into a small apartment back in the town where V lived. Fast forward 9 months and I'm divorced from V. Why it was so short to divorce is another tale. We had one daughter between us still at home, Rebecca, she was 13 at the time, and we're trying shared custody and live about a quarter of a mile apart. There are other kids from the marriage, but they were living apart from us at that time and don't play a part in this story. We had acquired a lake house during the marriage and had listed it to sell. and we had written into the divorce agreement to split the proceeds. But paying half the mortgage on that and the rent on my apartment was really stretching me thin financially. One day, Marie emails me, subject line all in caps saying, "V just tried to get me fired." Long story short, V emailed Marie's boss claiming that Marie was gossiping about V on sales calls to customers, but her boss knew it was nonsense and told V as much. Wisely, Marie didn't mess around waiting to see what was next. She went to the local courthouse that day and filed for an anti-harassment order against V. It took several visits to the judge as V chose to ignore multiple summons to court so that the judge could hear her side of the story. Eventually, the judge granted the order because V never showed up to court. During this time, V called 911 on me multiple times, one time claiming I put a letter bomb in her mailbox, the other 2 times that I had entered her apartment without her permission. The letter bomb accusation was due to me posting a link to a website where you can ship your enemy's glitter on Facebook months before, and subsequently mailing her a thick bundle of forms to sign. Police were called and I had to go to V's apartment and open the letter in front of the police. Needless to say, there was no glitter, let alone a bomb. Oddly enough, this accusation came just a few days after there had been an actual bomb threat called into town hall. The 2 times I had gone into her apartment had both been to drop off Rebecca's book bag when she had forgotten it in my apartment. Both times I had texts from V granting me permission to open the door and put the book bag just inside. She would then text me after I had done so, trying to revoke permission. To this day, I think V thinks that if she deletes a message on her end, the message is deleted on my end. Even though kids will be kids and Rebecca did forget her book bag at my place on at least one other subsequent occasion, I did not fall for V's ruse a 3rd time. All forgotten book bags were delivered by Rebecca and I, meeting halfway between apartments. Also included with the multiple 911 calls were multiple minor child wellness checks on evenings when I had Rebecca at my apartment. It's so much fun having to explain to your child why the police are showing up at 8 o'clock at night just to see if she is okay. Basically, V was trying to get me frustrated so that I would react badly. Throughout this whole mess, Sam and Marie have been lifesavers to me and Rebecca, my daughter, hosting and cooking weekly family dinners for us. They are Rebecca's godparents, and just being absolute rock steady in their support and tolerance of the situation. Around this time, V filed for sole custody. At the strong urging of my lawyer, I insisted on being a guardian ad litem, a GAL, being appointed to represent Rebecca's best interests, her being a minor. Of course, the parents must pay the fees of the GAL. At this point, my finances are really getting worrisome. I write an email to V saying we need to drop the price of the lake house and get that sold regardless of profit. I needed that albatross off from around my neck so I could continue to afford to live where I could co-parent Rebecca as well as fight the custody battle. So there I am, going deeper into debt, can't pay rent and mortgage long term, and V is starting another court battle for full custody. With no other choice, I move back in with Sam and Marie so I can continue to pay my lawyer and keep fighting. About a week after I'm settled back in with Sam and Marie, I hear from Rebecca that V's glass patio table was smashed the previous night. I was in New Hampshire that evening with witnesses, so it couldn't have been me. I was paying for Rebecca's cell phone, and we have Life 360, so we could know where each other was at any time. Due to an earlier threat by V to take the 2 youngest kids and move to California to be with the idiot from Facebook. Plus it had history, so I could at least prove my phone was in New Hampshire. Rebecca says she knows I was in New Hampshire and tells me she'll tell her mother that it wasn't me. The next day, I was served with a restraining order, an RO, claiming that I had vandalized V's patio furniture and that she felt afraid due to the letter bomb incident. The cop knew that it was nonsense, but the judge had no knowledge of the incident when V filed the restraining order and had to take her at her word. The restraining order was for 10 days, and then I could show up in court and contest it being continued. The officer who served the restraining order explained that he had to confiscate any firearms and licenses. While I did have a recently acquired Class A concealed carry license, actually from a couple's firearm course that was an anniversary gift from V the previous year, I hadn't any firearms other than a BB gun of Rebecca's. The officer left with just the Class A license, smiling as he said he was pretty sure I wasn't going to go on a rampage with a BB gun. The first thing I did the next day was to go to the police station and request all incident reports that involved me since I left her. I knew of 7 incidents, but the desk sergeant informed me they had 19 incident reports from V. He talked to me a bit, clearly trying to get a feel for what kind of person I was and just what was going on. We parted company with him assuring me that the patrol officers would now know what was going on, and the police department would do right by me, so long as I kept my cool. Fair enough. 2 nights before the court appearance to contest the restraining order, Sam, Marie, and I are sitting on their porch, drinking some brewskis and brainstorming about what I'm going to say to the judge. I'm a bit discouraged because I know it's going to be a he said, she said situation, and I'm living in Massachusetts. If your chromosomes don't match, you are a second-class citizen when it comes to parental rights. Plus, V deserves an Oscar for how well she plays the victim. It wasn't looking good. My only hope was if V decided the restraining order itself was enough to make me look bad to the GAL and not show up and let the restraining order expire. Marie suddenly said, "Hey, let me see that restraining order." I handed it over to her. "Hey, this is my judge. She's the judge that granted me the anti-harassment order against V." "You're kidding." Sam and I look at each other in amazement. "I swear it is. Let me go get it." Marie goes inside and comes back a few minutes later with her court order. Sure enough, it's the same judge. My grin felt like it was going to split my lips. Now I knew exactly what to do. And this is where the revenge begins. The court date to contest the restraining order arrived, and I'm there first thing, just me, no lawyer, because he had to appear in court elsewhere. I strongly hoped that V wouldn't show up, but she did. With someone other than her divorce lawyer, and before court was in session, her new lawyer approached me and offered to let the no contact order lapse, but wanted a do not abuse order left in place. I politely declined her offer, stating that I had done nothing to warrant either order and that I wanted the judge to hear my argument. V's lawyer was taken aback by this a bit and then shrugged as if to say, "It's your funeral," and walked back to where V was sitting. We went in front of the judge and V told her side of the story and I started telling mine, including all the incident reports from the police department, but V and her lawyer didn't have copies of all of them. So the judge sent us back to the gallery to await a second call while V and her lawyer reviewed the reports. When we were called back, the judge started to go into the content of the police reports and I stated that the content was almost irrelevant, but she insisted on going through them. During that, V emphasized the 2 incidents where I briefly entered V's apartment with her permission, but she characterized them as me doing so without her permission. I said that if necessary, I would be able to provide the communications where she gave me permission, but I didn't have them with me today. When going through the first police report from the night I found out about the online affair, wherein V claimed that I had brain lesions, V also tried to characterize me as having multiple personality disorder, as told to her by our shared primary care physician. The judge asked her, "So his doctor told you this without his permission?" "Yes, Your Honor." The judge looked at me puzzled. I shrugged and said, while slowly shaking my head in disbelief, "I have a very close relationship with my doctor. I highly doubt he would violate HIPAA." She looked a little nonplussed, but I think she got the message that V wasn't entirely being truthful. As that was the last police report to go, I reminded her that my point wasn't the content, but that I thought V was using the courts to harass and intimidate me and to make me look bad to the GAL. And I brought up that this isn't out of character for V, as she has an anti-harassment order put in place against her, put there by Your Honor, Your Honor. The judge blinked at that bit of information. I gave her the details and reminded her that V declined to show up at multiple hearings. As I recounted the particulars of Marie's story, the judge squinted her eyes more and more and her frown got deeper and deeper. She turned to V and her voice was slow, cold fury. "Do you have an anti-harassment order in place against you?" V's voice was so small and weak. "Yes, Your Honor." I so wanted to look at V's face to see her reaction, but I kept my eyes locked on the judge. The judge pointed at V. "Why didn't you show up to the hearings?" A pause as V struggled to find some excuse. "Because I didn't want to associate with that." But the judge waved her to silence. I think that was the turning point, as I think she was going to grant the request for the do not abuse, but she turned to me and sternly said, "I think there is a bit of this going on both sides, but clearly she wants you to stay out of her apartment." "Never again, Your Honor." "Restraining order terminated." And with a bang of her gavel, we were done. Because the restraining order was terminated, legally that meant that it never happened. I got my Class A concealed carry license back the next day and ultimately won the custody battle, a large part of which was the termination of the restraining order, but also due to V's subsequent increasingly poor emotional and verbal treatment of Rebecca. So, am I the jerk for how I handled this? Before you decide, there is an update from the future. My ex-wife tries to frame me for theft. Here's the background. At this point in the saga, having lost the custody battle, V is moving to New Hampshire to be with her primary lover, now husband number 5. A detail that amuses me to this day is that he shares the same first name as the Facebook lover from California, as mentioned in the first post. I always refer to them as Paul number 1 and Paul number 2 when talking about them. Yes, I'm easily amused. So here's the incident. About a month after the custody hearing at which I got full physical custody of Rebecca, V and I had an email exchange in which we agreed that I would go to her apartment and take Rebecca's captain's bed and some of Rebecca's belongings the day before movers arrived to pack up Voldemort's stuff, V. She was moving 75 miles away to central New Hampshire. Having burned pretty much every bridge in that area, as Sam drives a truck, he graciously agreed to come along to both help and to be a witness. So we get there at 7:20 p.m. and knock at the door. After a brief wait, V opens the door, iPhone glued to her ear. She sullenly mumbles something about her stuff being upstairs and then heads off to her second floor bedroom, weaving and mumbling something that made me stop and think. I didn't quite get it, but I recall thinking, I really cannot go in here at all without a witness. I stick my head out the door and say, Sam, come on, you need to come in with me. So we go in. Holy cow, it's not quite filthy, but it's beyond cluttered. By now, V has disappeared into her room, complete with slamming the door, so it takes me a bit of wandering to find Rebecca's room. It's not just that she's in the middle of packing, but there is crap everywhere. Dust, cobwebs, tracked in dirt, unwashed dishes, empty boxes of wine, dry dog food scattered and trampled underfoot. I could see that it's quite a nice place, an open living area with a balcony overlooking it, and lovely woodwork and exposed beams and inset shelves in the walls. An antique wood stove on a hearth is blazing away. Really, lots of potential, but a tip nonetheless. So Sam and I start gathering up Rebecca's stuff and take some stuff out to the car. I realize we need an Allen wrench to take apart the bed, so I go out to the car to get one and come back in. In lull of the activity, she had come back into the living area, but went right back into her bedroom as we climbed the stairs, phone still glued to her ear. It takes a bit, but we finally get the bed taken apart and have moved most of the stuff in Rebecca's room out to the front lawn. Without conferring, it's clear that Sam and I both decided to get the stuff to the front lawn and not worry about packing the vehicles until after we're completely out of the house. It's at this point that things start to get weird. Sam is carrying out the second to last load when V pops out of her bedroom door, looks out from the balcony and says,
"Why are you taking stuff out of my house?"
Sam drops what he's carrying and exits the house. He knew what was up instantly. I come out of Rebecca's room and V clearly didn't realize that I was there and say, "You agreed via email that we would take Rebecca's bed tonight." She looks startled and says,
"Is that Rebecca's stuff?"
"Of course it is. You said her stuff was in her room."
"Fine."
She goes back into her bedroom. I take what I'm carrying and go outside. Sam says, "Dude, that's not right. We need to call the police." You're absolutely right. I could tell that Sam was expecting me to object, and he does a double take when he realized that he wasn't going to have to convince me. "Crowsville Police Department, you're on a recorded line." "Yes, hi, my name is Jack Crow. I live at 321 Main Street here in Crowsville." While I'm talking to the police on the phone, I'm aware of V coming to the door and opening it and becoming quite agitated as she realizes that I'm talking to the police. By the time I finish the following explanation, she has slammed the door and is tromping around inside the living area, heatedly talking on her phone. I tell the police I'm at my ex-wife's apartment getting some of my daughter's belongings as we had agreed to via email, and while I'm getting the last of the stuff out of the house, she suddenly asks, "Why are you taking stuff out of my house?" So in order to protect all parties, I'm asking that a police officer come by to verify with Miss Crow that she agreed to this and that she is fine with what we have removed from the house. An officer will be right there, Mr. Crow. As I'm waiting for the officer to arrive, leaning nonchalantly against the front of Sam's truck, Sam is standing there next to me, just shaking his head. I'm gonna call Marie and just let her know what's going on. Right about here, V throws the front door open, muttering something about not having gotten all of Rebecca's stuff, and proceeds to deposit another laundry basket piled high with clothes and other items on the front stoop, and then disappears back inside. I start to whistle, pop goes the weasel. Most of the stuff we moved is still sitting on the front lawn. We leave it there. About 5 minutes later, the officer arrives. He steps out of the patrol SUV and I slowly approach him, arm extended to shake his hand. Good evening, officer. I'm Jack Crow.
Evening, Crow. Ali Johnson.
We shake hands, I give him a brief explanation of the situation, and he comments that I was right to call him and that he'll go speak to V. He's up there for about 2 minutes and then comes back down.
You guys are good to go.
We briefly chat with him, apologizing for having to get him involved, and he replies,
"No, you did the right thing. If a woman in Massachusetts says something bad about you and you've got stuff dangling between your legs, you're gonna be in trouble."
I liked him a lot after that. We start loading the rest of the stuff and he asks,
"How much more is in the house?"
"Nothing. It's all out here except that last laundry basket on the stoop that Miss Crow brought out while we were waiting for you."
"Oh, good. I can't sit here all night. If you guys are good to go, I'll take off." "Wait, what's that?"
"What's what?"
"I think I saw a phone in that basket."
He shines his flashlight on the laundry basket on the front stoop. I walk up to the basket. An iPhone is sitting on top of it. I pick it up and it looks like Rebecca's old iPhone 4. It's my daughter's old phone. I'll just take it with us. I carry the basket down to my car and put it in the back seat. Just as I'm walking away, it rings. Incoming call from V's landline. I realize it's V's phone. I pick it up and answer. "Hello?" Click. I look at the front. There's a text from Paul number 2 on the lock screen. "Is he gone yet?" Yep. It's her phone. "Wait, officer, I was wrong. It's Miss Crow's phone. Could you return it to her?" He takes it from me and returns it to V at the front door and walks back down to us.
"Okay, you are still good to go. I'm gonna go now."
"If you could, swing by again in 15 to 20 minutes. If we're still here, you might want to pull in and make sure we're still okay."
"Sounds good. You two take care now."
Not 5 minutes after he pulls out, and while we're still loading stuff, V again pops out of the front door, phone glued to her ear.
"Is the officer still here?"
"No."
"Get him back now."
"Why?"
"I want him back. Get him."
And back inside she goes. I'm briefly tempted to tell her, if you want the cop back, you call for him. But that little voice in my head says, you call. So I did redial Crowsville's finest and request that Officer Johnson, to return to the address. Again, Sam and I assume our waiting positions at the front of the truck. This is why I didn't want Rebecca here tonight.
"Good call,"
Sam said. A few minutes later, Officer Johnson arrives. "Hey, Officer Johnson, long time no see." He grins at me. "She came out the front door just after you left, asking for the police to be called."
"I'll go see what she wants."
He goes up there and V hands him her phone. He talks for a few minutes, hangs up the phone, continues to speak with V for 20 more seconds, and then returns to us. I look at him, quizzically.
"No worries, guys. You're still good to go, but I'm gonna stay here until you're done."
I continue to give him the raised eyebrow.
"She wanted to accuse you of trying to steal her phone, but I pointed out to her that I was the one to notice it in the basket that you hadn't touched yet, and that you were the one to ask me to return it to her. Her boyfriend asked if you could be made to wait until Sunday, but I told him no. They got 3 more things to load and then they're out of here. Just finish up, guys. We all want to go home where it's warm."
We finished up and we all shook hands and got out of there, having successfully avoided being framed by my ex-wife because we were lucky enough that the cop noticed the phone. So all things considered, from the start to the very end, am I the jerk for how things played out? Let's break this down from the beginning. Part 1, and then we'll go into part 2. First off, it's sad that he had to live through this entire cheating while knowing it was happening. The way it's explained is a little bit strange because I can't understand why, if he already knew the cheating was about to happen, why he wouldn't have intervened or tried to be separated before it happened, unless he thought it would help him in the custody battle in the future and in the divorce. It sounds like that's sort of implicit in what he's saying here, but he's not saying it directly. And as we see how things turn out later on in the story, that isn't exactly how it plays out, which begs the question again, Again, why put yourself through that? He specifically says, I left her the weekend after their hotel stay. She would spend the days with him and come home for the afternoon and evening without a shred of guilt showing in her actions. Having to live through that doesn't seem worth it just to get a couple extra private eye pictures of them leaving the hotel and all the other places that they took pictures of them. But maybe he thought it was worth it. And about the whole situation about entering her apartment and V saying that she didn't give him permission, it is funny that she thinks that if she deletes a text message on her end, it'll be deleted on his end, because that's obviously not how it works. But if that was such a crucial thing he was counting on, why wouldn't he bring that to court? He told the judge, I would be able to provide the communications where she gave me permission, but I don't have them with me today. What? Wasn't that one of the only things he felt like he had to stand on when he thought that he was going to be discriminated against because he was a male in this custody battle? I guess in the end, nothing really mattered other than the fact that V had ignored the court summons this entire time, and that's what ultimately swayed the judge in the OP's favor. I feel bad for anyone that has to go anything like this on either side. Then in part 2, the OP clearly is on edge because he has set up every precaution he possibly can. He's using some 200 IQ prediction methods to try and figure out what her whole scheme is. He even brings Sam with him so he's not alone with her, so she can't just randomly say something and then it becomes a he said she said situation. It is interesting that both him and Sam had the intuition to call the police right then and there, when from the perspective of the audience it's not exactly obvious why they would do so. They just thought that something was off, and it turns out something was off. At the time they just couldn't figure out what it was, and it ended up being the police officer who saw the phone in the basket to begin with. She was the one that was trying to pin the theft of the phone on them, and she almost got away with it if it wasn't noticed at that point. So let me know if you guys have ever experienced something like this in your own lives, and if so, feel free to submit your own stories via the link in the description. And of course, let me know down below, jerk or not a jerk, and why. An entitled woman sees my husband in a store, basically falls in love with him, and demands that he leave me to be with her. When I arrive, she tries to fight me, and whoever the winner is gets to be with my husband. Then there's puke involved. Let me explain what happened. Subscribe to Am I the Jerk on YouTube and hit the bell to turn on notifications. When my now adult daughter was almost 3 years old, we had a regular monthly family dinner plan. We would go to a used bookstore that was near a Mexican place we liked and a McDonald's which our kids liked. The Mexican restaurant would let us sit on the porch and bring Happy Meals there for the kids. One night, our son, older than our daughter, was at a sleepover, so we were a party of 3. After eating, we went to the used bookstore. We had a stroller with us so that our daughter could sit in it if she got too tired. She was an easy kid who would just climb into the little stroller and chill or snooze if we were not done browsing. I was looking at cookbooks while my husband was in the kids section with our daughter. I noticed some red-headed chick talking to my husband. I went back to the books for a couple of minutes, and when I look up, the woman is still talking, but more talking at him than to him. He was starting to look very uncomfortable. I can tell she is hitting on him by the way he held up his hand and pointed to his wedding ring. Being me, I let this play out for a few minutes, mostly to laugh about this with him later. As I watch, my daughter goes to him and wraps her arms around him. She gives this woman the nastiest look I had ever seen on her face. I start walking over because I can tell that my daughter is about to say something to this woman that I will either laugh at or need to intervene because of. As I get almost to them, my daughter tells the woman that her daddy already has a mommy for her and that if she doesn't get away from him, she is going to puke on her. My daughter always has had the ability to vomit at will. She had already weaponized it against one of my male relatives with a weak stomach. The woman, not knowing that I was behind her, told my daughter that her daddy didn't have a mommy to go with him, and daddies needed mommies. My daughter looked at me with a look that clearly said, "She is an idiot. Get her away from me now." I walk past the woman and up to my husband. I put my arm around him and lean into him. Then I put the hand wearing my wedding ring up on his chest as I look at her. The redhead doesn't have the sense to just leave the area. She had to start a rant about how I should have been right by him if I wanted to keep him, how he should go with her and divorce me because she would never be away from him, and how I don't deserve a man and she does, so she is just going to replace me and raise my kids as her own. I looked up at my husband and he asked how we kept getting these weirdos that have elevators that don't go all the way up to want to replace me. The redheaded chick loses it and starts saying that she wants to fight me over him, that whichever of us wins will get to keep him. I asked her if she seriously thought I would bother with a fight. He was already mine and I don't believe in fights. I just shoot to kill. Then this lunatic starts screaming at me that I am trying to kill her. At that point, my daughter had enough. She walked over to the lady and waited until the stupid woman woman bent down to talk to her. Then my daughter puked all over her and sort of up onto her neck so that when she stood up, lots of the puke ran down her shirt. Staff was already on the way over and wanted to know why the lady was screaming. I told them she was hitting on my husband and then wanted to fight me for him. I didn't even know why she suddenly started saying that I wanted to kill her or to shoot her. I didn't even own a gun. She was just being an idiot. Then she got my daughter all upset, so my daughter puked. I cleaned our daughter up and had to rinse out her mouth. On the way home, my husband insisted that we stop and buy her some ice cream. When I asked my daughter why she thought she needed to puke on the lady, my daughter told me that we had already wasted enough time talking and clearly it wasn't going anywhere, so she ended it. My daughter has always had a way of cutting through the garbage in life. So, am I the jerk for how I handled this? What should I have done? There's got to be something seriously wrong with somebody who says, after learning that they're already married, well, I'll just fight the person that you're married to, and then I'll get married to you. As if that has any bearing on what the marriage is at all, or what the relationship is at all. It reminds me of the mentality of a boy in middle school. He thinks that if the pretty girl sees him fight somebody, then she'll magically just like him out of nowhere. One of the top responses was actually a story that somebody responded to this with. I had something similar happen with myself and my longtime boyfriend, now husband. We moved to a new neighborhood and attended the neighborhood Halloween party. I was finishing up setting out candy for the early trick-or-treaters and arrived later than my boyfriend and my son. I find my boyfriend in a conversation with a woman that I'd never seen before, and that's cool because again, we were new to the neighborhood. Except my son comes up to me and tells me that the lady is flirting with my boyfriend. Ha, I think. She doesn't realize he's attached. Okay, so I go up, smiling and friendly, and my boyfriend immediately introduces me as his long-term girlfriend, and he makes sure to mention twice that we had just moved here together, hoping that she would get the hint. I should mention that my boyfriend is 16 years older than me, successful and very attractive. Women are always hitting on him. It's just a part of life, and most of the time we laugh it off or I remind him that he's a silver fox. This lady, she took the cake. As soon as my boyfriend walked away, she began aggressively interrogating me about what I did for a living.
Oh, you only do that? Haha, I'd be a much better partner for someone like him because I do X, Y, and Z and understand him better.
I am totally taken aback by her sheer audacity. She continues and even follows me around the park where the party was and finally got visibly and verbally angry with me for stealing a man her age from her, which was insane. She asked me what my plans were with him, so I decided to deal with her and I replied, I don't have any plans. I'm just using him for loud, dirty, nasty sessions of doing the deed. Nice to meet you. Have a good day. She was so shocked she tripped. She never bothered us again, which was nice. At least in the second story, the other woman didn't try and fight the OP in some sort of winner-take-all battle royale. But if a situation like this were to happen in your own life, with your boyfriend, your girlfriend, your wife, your husband, whatever, and somebody who knows that they're with you is aggressively trying to flirt with them, trying to get them to leave you, how would you handle that situation? Let me know down below in jerk or not a jerk and why. Am I the jerk for telling my girlfriend to get rid of her creepy dummy? I'm a 22-year-old male, my girlfriend is 21. She loves horror. She told me about 3 months ago that she read Goosebumps in elementary school and it sparked a lifelong interest in horror. And that when she was a kid, all she ever wanted for birthdays and Christmas was a replica of Slappy, the creepy ventriloquist dummy. I'm kind of a wimp about that stuff and I think the dummy thing is frankly insane, but I like her enough to ignore it. Until last week, her birthday, when her mother bought her a Slappy replica. She's afraid of dummies, hence why she never got it for her as a kid. My girlfriend was thrilled. You would have thought her mom had handed her the keys to a Tesla with the way that she was acting. She was literally crying with happiness. When she saw the expensive necklace that I got her, she just said, "Thank you." She is totally obsessed with the dummy. Her roommate thinks it's hilarious and she carries it around her apartment like a teddy bear and even sleeps with it on her bed. I kind of snapped last night when I went over and she was holding the dummy when I answered the door. I told her it was creepy and she was being weird about it and she needed to get rid of it. I'll admit, I raised my voice a little bit. My girlfriend started crying and her roommate told me to leave. My roommate and friends have been texting me saying I'm not supporting her and the dummy is harmless. My girlfriend herself hasn't reached out to me, so So, am I the jerk? This story isn't over because in a strange turn of events, the people that this post was about actually ended up seeing this post and replied, LMAO Matt, did you seriously not think either of us would see this post? You only learned about this subreddit because V showed you some of the posts in here in an attempt to get you to engage in any of her interests. Makes sense why you only care about it when it could benefit you. I don't know whether this is some passive-aggressive power move to get V to text you back, or if you're just that desperate for someone to agree with you. But either way, I don't think it's working out like you hoped. Certainly works well for me, since now I don't have to worry about biting my tongue for her sake. Then the section was quoted that said, until last week, her birthday, when her mother bought her a Slappy replica, my girlfriend was thrilled, and when I gave her a necklace, she just said thank you. They continued by saying, of course she was excited. It's something that she had wanted for years, and the fact that it came from her mother also made it special since she hates the thing. And you can act all wounded about her not being as thrilled about the necklace, but we both know that you're intentionally leaving out the fact that V told you in the past that she doesn't like wearing jewelry. She doesn't like how a lot of it looks, and she has sensory problems with it. And no one asked you to spend $1,000 on a necklace that looks like an Amazon logo for a girl that you've been with for less than 7 months, dude. To be honest, it was just kind of weird. Quoting the part where he said, I kind of just snapped last night when I went over and she was holding the dummy when she answered the door. Kind of, a little bit, you blew up. The people from across the way came to check in on us after you left because of your yelling. Rather than talking to your girlfriend and expressing your reservations like a normal person, you bottled it up and then let it out on her with no warning. I know for sure V is done with you, but honestly, for the sake of your future relationships, I hope that you grow up and learn to communicate without alerting everyone in the building of your issues. Also, get better taste. Goosebumps is awesome. You're the jerk. Oof, this person came in and lit the OP up. Posts like these always remind me that there's always a bit of bias from the person telling the story because it's their perspective. From the way the OP sees it, he did this really kind thing and bought her a very expensive necklace that cost $1,000, which is pretty wild from both perspectives, but from the perspective of the other person, they think it's weird because it's been less than 7 months, but more importantly, it's something that he's buying for her because he thinks that she should like it instead of listening to her actual interests, which include Slappy the dummy. I mean, they even point to that in the section before where they say you only learned about this because V showed you some of the posts in here in an attempt to get you to engage in any of her interests. And then of course the fact that he got way more mad at the opening of the door holding the dummy than he originally explained. And by the way, if you want to see a picture of the dummy, I'll throw it on the Am I the Jerk Twitter account. So now you see two perspectives on this story. Let me know what side of the fence you sit on, and jerk or not a jerk, and why. Am I the jerk for dropping our dinner on the ground and walking out when my boyfriend asked me, what's for dinner tonight, B? I was over at my boyfriend's apartment this weekend and I was cooking dinner because he was studying for exams. I made pasta and chunky sauce with meatballs and veggies. I told him dinner was ready and he goes, what's for dinner tonight, B? With a lot of emphasis on the last word. I was fed up. I had a pretty rough day with work and I have some awfully bad associations with that word being used by other people in my life who were pretty terrible. So I was so irritated that I dropped the pot of pasta sauce that I'd been carrying right on the ground and said, well, nothing's for dinner tonight now, and I better not hear you use that word again. It's for the girls. He was freaking out about how the sauce landed on his rug, and he even said, you're seriously acting like a bee right now. I don't know what else to call it. I just walked out and got takeout for myself, and I went to my friend's house. She thought it was funny, but my boyfriend was furious. He kept texting and calling and sending me voice memos trying to explain that what's for dinner B was a TikTok trend and that he was just quoting something as a joke to put it on TikTok. I thought that was the worst excuse ever. It doesn't matter if he saw it as a joke or stole the joke. It was still disrespectful, but it didn't change the fact that he thought that it was still funny. To demean me while I was trying to do him a favor? Like hell, I come over when he was studying to make a home-cooked dinner and he decides it's time for jokes? So I put my phone on Do Not Disturb for the night and split a bottle of wine with my friend and her roommate. The next morning, he was sending me angry texts demanding I clean his rug because he was too busy with exams to do it. I was shocked that he left it overnight. That's disgusting. I texted him back saying, yeah, so that's the B tax, honey. Leave me alone until you're ready to handle your own cooking and cleaning because this B isn't anymore. Also, it's vile that you left that soaking in all night. He called me and told me that he was okay with doing his own housework, but I did throw a full pot pot of sauce at the ground, so that's on me to clean up. I told him, yeah, no, I'm not comfortable doing chores for you if you see me like I'm your B. He told me he didn't and it was just a trend, and I got pissed off that he was playing that TikTok trend BS excuse again, and I told him, well, I'm starting a trend called saucing, where as a little joke, people throw pasta sauce around. You can't be mad because it's just a little trend, a little jokey joke, just a little prank, bro. He got really pissed and hung up on me, and now I'm seriously wondering if this dumb TikTok joke is going to be the end of things between us. To address some of the comments I've gotten a lot, and I don't have time to reply to everyone, starting with, but did you tell him not to call you a B? Like, how would he know otherwise? Honestly, if someone has gone to the age of 30 and not realized that women, as a whole, do not like having demeaning slurs used against them, they're beyond my help. This isn't something that needs to be told. I shouldn't have to go through life like, hey man, just in case you were thinking I might like demeaning slurs against my gender used on me, I don't actually. Smile. And if you were about to comment something like that, let me just tell you in no uncertain terms, women do not like being called B's by men. Do not call women B's. If you needed to be told that it is unkind, consider yourself officially told. Now you have no excuse not to understand. So, am I the jerk for how I reacted when my boyfriend asked me, what's for dinner tonight, B? Her comeback where she said there's a new TikTok trend where they throw pasta on the ground cracked me up. And yeah, how could this guy leave an entire pot of pasta sauce just soaking into the floor the entire night? Depending on what exact material that floor is made out of, it might not ever come out. And does anyone know, is that actually a real TikTok trend? I've never seen that before, but maybe it was in the past at some point. So let me know if this would bother you if your boyfriend or girlfriend called you a B. In this exact context, would it bother you, and what would you do? Jerk or not a jerk, and why? Am I the jerk for telling my fiance that he embarrassed me when he started singing the happy birthday song to his 5-year-old son at the restaurant? I'm a 30-year-old female and I've been with my fiance Ned, who's 36, for a year and a half. He has a 5-year-old son with his ex-girlfriend. They don't have a custody arrangement, but he has him most of the week because his mom is currently sick. His son is lovely, but I noticed that Ned takes him everywhere he goes, including places that aren't child-friendly, and we have an issue with that now, but we're working on it. His son's birthday was 5 days ago. Ned took us out to a restaurant to celebrate. The place was nice and looked a bit unfitting for the occasion because it was a somewhat expensive place. Anyways, we ordered the food and then got the birthday cake, which was a surprise to me because I thought we were going to celebrate at home, so we could be free to sing and play however we wanted. I still had no issue with that until Ned started singing the happy birthday song to his son. I was stunned. I almost dropped my plate. He was singing it at the top of his lungs, not even looking around or paying attention to how many people were staring at us awkwardly. I felt so embarrassed. I kept whispering for him to stop, but he ignored me. Of course, my future stepson was hyped and a little too active, which isn't good when we're in a public place. I expected the staff, the manager, anyone to get involved and stop him, but no one did. In fact, some woman came up to us and offered that she could help him take a video recording. I wasn't in it at all. I froze in my seat, looking stunned and a little angry. He looked at me a little later, asking what was wrong. I didn't say anything except, "Thanks for finally noticing." He didn't understand what I meant, and I didn't explain until we were in the car. I flat out told him that he embarrassed me the second he started singing in the restaurant. He looked shocked, saying he didn't get why I would be embarrassed by him celebrating his son's birthday and cheering him up. I told him we could have done this at home when we'd be more comfortable and free. He took it as in I was ashamed of him and his son, but I denied it and said that it just felt awkward and embarrassing. Maybe because I've never been in this situation before, and also judging from the restaurant we were at. He said that his son's mom is sick and he's trying to do all he can to cheer him up, and that all families do that and no one had an issue with it except me. Then when I tried to explain, he got mad and said he no longer felt like talking. We haven't been speaking since then. It appears he's still salty about me saying what I said and insisting that I see him and his son as an embarrassment. I think he's being too harsh with the whole ignoring me thing instead of talking it out, but am I the jerk? Huh? I don't exactly understand what she's angry about. I get that she's not used to this meaning singing happy birthday in a public restaurant, but it's a little kid. His mom is sick, his parents are separated, he's with his dad, and it's his birthday, and I can't possibly imagine why singing happy birthday to this kid would be anything that would be wrong. Even if you did feel embarrassed, which is perfectly valid, that's what you felt, it's strange to think that your mild, temporary discomfort is worth overriding this little kid's birthday. The way I see this, it really comes comes down to a question of who gets to have the discomfort. Should it be you, the person telling the story, the adult, or the little kid? And I know the OP probably doesn't see it like that. They see it as some sort of conflict with the dad, but that's the way it seems to boil down to me. The top response to this says he gleefully sang happy birthday to his child whose mother is sick while you sat there sulking in your anger. Are you applying to be the evil stepmother by any chance? You prioritize not being embarrassed over a fun moment between a father and his son. The restaurant staff didn't think it was inappropriate. It doesn't seem that you are a good match for someone with kids. But let me know how you see the situation. Maybe you think that she's totally in the right. Let me know down below, jerk or not a jerk, and why. Am I the jerk for telling my sister she overreacted when she screamed at me for entering her and her husband's room? I'm a 23-year-old female and I'm a full-time college student. Right now I live with my sister Claire and her husband Thomas while I get through my current semester. I don't work, so I don't have everything I need for my daily skin and hair routine, so I borrow stuff from Claire. Claire didn't have an issue in the beginning, but then started complaining about me randomly walking into her room, but I go in there looking for the stuff I asked for. She gave me a hard time just because I walked in on Thomas half exposed to get the eyeshadow that I borrowed from her. And then that other time when I walked in late at night, she told me I needed to get permission from her to enter the room before I take anything, but I figured this would make things complicated. It's enough that I have to ask to borrow an item. So last night at around 10 p.m. I went upstairs and into her bedroom and I grabbed the hairdryer. I walked in and whoops, I saw them in an intimate position together. I had no idea they were doing it, especially since Claire told me that Thomas has been feeling sick the past 2 days. She lashed out at me, yelling that I get out. I quickly grabbed the hairdryer and then walked out and shut the door. Minutes later, she came downstairs in her robe and went off on me, saying that she was done with me repeatedly disrespecting and violating her and her husband's privacy. I told her it was cool, no big deal, and that I needed the dryer, but I didn't have time to ask for permission. She got even louder, saying that I had no business barging into her marital space and embarrassing her and her husband like this. I told her that I was sorry, but she really overreacted to this whole thing. This made her more pissed, and she went on about how I'm living here rent-free and yet not being respectable enough. I stopped arguing and went to my room. This morning, Thomas left the house early, and Claire ignored me at breakfast, still upset, saying that I don't get to say whether she overreacted or not and my behavior was inappropriate. She even wants me to apologize to her husband for making last night awkward. Am I the jerk? If you're living at the expense of somebody else completely for free, you're gonna have to live by their house rules, and she's not asking much. All she's saying is, don't come into my room, give me privacy, I'm letting you live here for free, don't do this. But the OP here seems to be hyper-focused on the fact that her sister is overreacting. When you tell someone not to do something and they do it, and then you tell them not to do it again and they do it again, for most people, you're beyond the point of normally reacting. You go into overreacting territory, but it's warranted at that point because she's told the OP multiple times not to do this. It's not that complicated. So who's in the right, who's in the wrong, jerk or not a jerk, and why? My mother was dying, and my girlfriend took that opportunity to cheat on me with a random guy that recently joined her friend group because she knew that I would be distracted with my mother's death. I was the one that walked in on them and saw it with my own eyes, but they didn't see me. So I decided to come up with a plan to literally destroy their lives permanently and do it in a way that they would never know that I was the one behind it. Here's what happened. Subscribe to Am I the Jerk on YouTube and hit the bell to turn on notifications. I will have to reveal and admit a few things about myself I'd rather not, and I'm not proud of. If you hate or struggle with reading, then don't even continue. My story is unfortunately true, and I would not wish my life upon anyone, not even those I chose to seek out revenge upon. When I was 18 years old, my father suffered a debilitating stroke and could never work or drive again. I volunteered to look after him as my mother had a full-time job. My family needed her to keep working. Sadly, exactly 1 year to the day of his stroke, he passed away after enduring a triple bypass. I lost it, as we used to say back in the day, and it changed something inside of me. I had lived a somewhat sheltered life due to regularly attending church and church activities. When my father passed, if I wanted to go to college, I would have to pay for it out of pocket. I did not qualify for any loans, thankfully in retrospect. I got a menial job and began to party at age 19, having never tasted alcohol, done illegal substances, substances or have ever done the deed before. I had been bullied quite a bit growing up. I had developed very late and always looked several years younger than my friends. At a party one night, I met a guy several years older than me. We'll call him Benji. He asked me to come by after my shift at my terrible minimum wage job the next day, and I agreed. When I arrived, he brought me into his house where two of his friends were busy snorting through a table of white powder. I'd seen illegal substances in movies, so I rightfully assumed it was coke. They offered a line and laughed at my refusal to try it. The reason Benji had singled me out was the fact that even at age 19, I looked like I should have been a freshman or sophomore in high school. The dealer and his guys had kids selling the white powder at all of the local high schools. The area that I'm from had a lot of old wealth and trust fund kids. They wanted me to go to each high school campus each day and pick up cash while dropping off pre-weighed bags of coke. They would buy packs of cigarettes and put coke in each with a small initial on the bottom indicating which school. They'd gotten their hands on a cellophane wrapping machine that would seal and shrink the plastic. Everything worked well as planned for years. It was amazing to learn how many cops, lawyers, and even judges were on the take. I did things in those younger days that could have gotten me a very long prison sentence, or worse had I been caught. I quit my stupid job and worked daily for Benji. If I wasn't delivering or weighing, Benji and his buddies were teaching me how to blast gats, work out, or fight. They'd built a full-size boxing ring out back because they truly loved to spar. They sensed I'd been picked on a lot growing up. Even though I'd grown another 3 inches in height after high school to stand at 6'2", I was still wiry and not very strong. Benji was several years older than me and had been stationed in South Korea for many years. There, he took it upon himself to learn a form of martial arts known as subak, but he'd also been a boxer as well. The three guys loved teaching me how to handle myself. They teach me to master one move, then delighted in springing a new, never-before-seen move on me. None of this was ever meant to attack anyone, strictly self-defense. They wanted to be sure I could protect myself should anything bad go down, and wanted me to be able to have their backs. Benji made me carry a loaded 9mm everywhere we drove. He carried a huge .357 Magnum revolver. Eventually, I was several years into college and had begun to sell to classmates. My mom was proud I was paying for my own tuition and books, never asking how. Yes, there are some people, albeit very few, that use money earned from unsavory deeds to better themselves, just as there are a few strippers who use that money to get a degree. It is rare, but it does happen. What my mom never knew was the fact that I was making more money in a week selling these substances than she did as a teacher in an entire month. I drove an old Camry. I never bought flashy clothes or threw money around to impress anyone. I kept as low of a profile as I could. I finished my bachelor's degree in 3 years due to having plenty of free time. I initially wanted to be a lawyer, but I had known far too many corrupt cops and judges. I did study law with no goal of ever passing the bar because I wanted to become and eventually became a jury consultant. For those that don't know what that is, when a law firm has a client they are defending, a list of potential jurors is sent out. Television makes it look like lawyers decide for or against potential jurors on the spot in court. A good lawyer already has a very good idea of each potential juror's background before they enter the room. My job was to take each name and research any background I could find. The firm I worked for decided what was pertinent information for each particular case. The firm I work for has the highest regard in my area. I can research a lot of information about people legally through something as simple as an online background data site. In the much more recent past, I reacquainted with a high school classmate we'll call Shayna. I discovered that she and I both had crushes on each other back in the day, but we'd both been too shy to say a word to each other. Without a lot of pointless details, suffice it to say, Shayna and I became best friends, fell head over heels in love, and were planning a future together. Both of our previous relationships had been disasters. Mine in particular had left me feeling totally dead inside, believing that I was incapable of love. It had been years since I had dated by choice. My previous ex, we'll call Allison, had done things cold and utterly heartless to cause our breakup. I was nothing but good to her, rescuing her from a toxic relationship, never abused her, and let her know no human deserves to be abused. When she stabbed me in the back and left me, my life was in total ruin. Finding Shayna didn't just give me hope, it made me realize that every relationship before her had been pointless. Shayna was the love of my lifetime. We were meant to be together, and finally were. Sadly, 5 years ago, I awoke to discover Shayna was not beside me. I thought nothing of it until I went into the laundry room to find her face down on the floor. When I picked her up, even before I turned her over, I knew something was wrong. Her body was completely stiff. When I did turn her over, I realized she was dead. Rigor mortis had already set in, and her face was frozen in the most painful expression of agony you could imagine. I called 911 even knowing that she was already dead and long past saving. I really don't want to go into the detail about that night. Suffice it to say, the cops suspected I'd done something or she'd OD'd. For 5 hours, detectives went through everything we owned. I was questioned repeatedly the same questions by multiple cops, all while I was trying to console her mother with the realization that her one and only daughter was dead. The next day, I accompanied Shayna's mother to Shayna's neurologist. Shayna had epilepsy and her doctor suspected that she might have died from SUDEP, sudden unexpected death due to epilepsy, which neither of us had ever heard of. Months later, when the autopsy came back, that was the cause of death. The next few days were a blur of misery, tears, and disbelief. Devastated does not begin to express how I felt from that point for many, many months. I will not lie, there were many moments I thought of and even planned to end it. I knew Shayna would want me to live, and after seeing how the loss of a child had affected her mother, I could not do that to my own mom. I managed to face the future only by focusing on my mother, who was getting up in years at the time. I closed myself off to all friends and extended family. It was hard enough just having the fortitude to hold down my job and look after my mom. I worked out every day and did cycling for cardio. I took some Krav Maga classes to relieve stress, but I didn't even think of dating, and frankly, the idea seemed pointless. Shayna was truly a special person with a beautiful soul. I knew I could never have that kind of relationship with anyone ever again. Eventually, 2 years passed and I met a female we will call Angie. We initially started hanging out as friends again, as that is what I needed the most at the time. But as I opened up about what happened with Allison and then Shayna, we got closer and Angie seemed to sympathize. We started sleeping together and eventually became a couple. I was still having to keep some of the focus on my mother, though I enjoyed my time with Angie. She seemed to appreciate that I actually listened, spoke honestly, and was protective of her. She said that she loved me, and I admitted I loved her. I never told her a word about how I'd paid for college or the things I'd seen or done. Shayna knew and loved me in spite of it all. While I knew that it would never be what Shayna and I had, I never told or even hinted at that to Angie. Things went along for the most part. My mother's need for assistance was fairly limited. Angie knew what I'd endured losing Shayna, and she seemed to understand the responsibility I had looking after my mom. Angie and I had been in a committed, monogamous relationship for well over a year when my mother had to have some medical tests done. My mom had a leaking heart valve and the tests were done to determine if they could repair the valve. A week later, we received good news. The valve could indeed be replaced. However, we also received devastating news. While running the tests, they discovered 4 small masses in and around her right kidney. The odds were high that the masses were tumors and malignant. The doctors did a biopsy to discover she did in fact have renal kidney cancer. She began chemotherapy and I knew my focus needed to be on my mom. Things had been great with Angie. We were planning on moving in together. She lived in a town about 30 miles from me. When I told Angie about my mom, she seemed deeply concerned and supportive. When I explained it meant we would see less of each other, she assured me that she had no desire to put things between us on hold. She said she wanted to be there for me if in no other way as emotional support. I told Angie, in fact, I urged Angie that if she decided she wanted to take a break or thought she might be interested in anyone she met just to tell me, and I would understand. She assured me that she cherished me in her life and that nobody could ever take my place in her life. Initially, the chemotherapy seemed to be having none of the horrible side effects. It was well into her 2nd month before she started noticing weakness and a loss of appetite. I talked to and texted Angie multiple times every day. She would message me asking me how my mom was doing as soon as she woke up each morning, and we often spent hours before falling asleep talking and telling each other how much they were missed to each other. We got to see and spend the night together about every 2 weeks, but everything seemed fine when we did. My mom's condition began to worsen, so I told Angie that she should go out with friends and have some enjoyment in life. As summer began, I knew Angie would enjoy going to outdoor activities even without me. My mom's failing health that summer meant no fun in the sun for me. Angie would go out with friends, and I enjoyed hearing about the silly things she and her friends did. I was genuinely glad that she wasn't being a shut-in over issues in my life. She always expressed concern and sadness each time I told her what was going on with my mom. The chemo was in fact killing the cancer cells. However, she was growing more and more frail. I realized the cancer was no longer killing my mom, the medicine was. I needed to take a break, so a group of ladies from my mom's church came to sit with her to give me a little free time on my own. I called Angie as I was nearing her town. She gave me the address of where her and her friends were at so I could meet with them. When I arrived, I saw most of her friends, which I'd already met. As I made my way through the house to the back deck, I saw a guy sitting very close to Angie. They were both laughing and cutting up with other friends. She introduced me as her boyfriend to the guy, Will. He shook my hand, insisting he was glad to meet me. I was cordial to him. I don't think Angie suspected. I immediately felt something was amiss with Will. I suppose many people get a gut feeling when they encounter someone shifty. Due to my own criminal activity many years before, my takes one to know one instincts told me there was something shady about Will. I knew he was new to their group of friends. None of them, including Angie, had known him longer than a couple of months. I must be clear that I know now what I felt at the time was not jealousy. Angie had many male friends, all of whom I genuinely liked, but there was something I sensed about Will that made me a bit skeptical about his character. I tried my best to ignore it, writing the feeling off as mere jealousy. I began to talk with Angie and her friends, trying to put my mind at ease. I monitored Will from afar and interacted with him cordially. Angie and I stayed at her place that night before I had to leave to head home. Over the next several weeks, my mother's condition began to worsen, but Angie and I spoke and texted throughout the day, every day. In hindsight, I now realize I was initiating most of our conversation, but at the time, I wasn't keeping count. One day, a few relatives volunteered to look after my mom to give me a break. I headed to see Angie, calling her on the way. She told me what restaurant she and her friends were having dinner at, so I made my way there. I was pulling into a parking space and I saw Will get into a late model black Mustang. He pulled out, though he didn't see me since he was unfamiliar with my car. I made my way inside where Angie and her friends greeted me with hugs and words of sympathy and encouragement. We all had dinner and a few drinks before Angie and I went back to her place. Before bed, I casually asked why Will had left before I got to say hello. Angie stated that she had no idea Will had even been at the restaurant. The place we'd eaten was in a strip mall next to several other businesses. I thought perhaps he had come out of one of those stores and neither Angie nor her friends had seen him. At any rate, I again stayed with her that night before heading back to my place at about noon. The next day, my mom had become very ill and had to be taken to the hospital via ambulance. She had pneumonia and was extremely weak due to the chemo and susceptible to many ailments. For 3 weeks she was hospitalized. They gave her many medications via an IV, but her condition worsened each day. The doctors finally informed me that she had at most a week to live. I knew she would not want to leave this earth in that hospital room, so the staff made arrangements for hospice to bring her home and help me make her last few days as peaceful as possible. When everything had been set up, we brought my mom home. Though extremely weak, she was glad to see her house and familiar settings once again. We both knew she didn't have much longer to live. While she was a bit afraid, she also told me she was ready to go and see my father once again after so long. I got one of my cousins to look after my mom for a few hours, got in my car and drove to see Angie without calling. I hadn't called because I was crying so hard facing my mom's impending demise, I wouldn't have been able to talk. When I arrived at Angie's house, I saw a black Mustang parked in her driveway behind her car. I actually didn't think anything of it as I was so focused on soon losing my mother. I used the key she had given me to enter the kitchen, as we always did. As soon as the door opened, I heard loud music playing, but still didn't really suspect anything. I saw no one in the living room or on the back deck. I walked down the hallway towards her bedroom and heard noises coming from inside. As I reached for the door handle, I stopped. I realized the sounds I heard were intimate in nature. My heart sank even further as I pulled back my hand, not wanting to draw attention. Her bathroom was connected to a guest room with an adjoining bathroom. I quietly walked around and into the unlit bathroom to find her bedroom door open. I stopped in my tracks as I saw them both completely naked going at it, oblivious to my presence. Honestly, my first instinct was to run full speed and introduce his face to the back of his skull with my knee. But I knew I had to stay out of trouble for the sake of my mother and my job, so I slowly backed away, shaking with anger. I went back through the guest room, out of the house, and to my car. I hadn't been seen. I just sat there in the car, bawling my eyes out. About half an hour later, I cranked my car and headed back to my mom's. I told no one what I'd just seen. Everyone assumed my tears were totally in regard to my mom. They of course partially were, but the betrayal I'd just seen was something so sadistic I struggled to grasp grasp it. My logic knew my mom was my top priority, especially so close to the end. Yet I felt so deceived by Angie. I felt a rage like I've never known before, and I'd felt plenty of rage. I thought of calling Angie, letting her know what I'd seen and cursing her out, but I knew if she didn't care enough to be faithful to me while my mother was on her deathbed, a steam of profanity wouldn't bother her. I made sure my mother was comfortable and went to try and sleep in my old childhood room. I cried, I slept. I woke up crying and cried some more throughout the night. I awoke to my cell phone ringing and saw that it was Angie. I ignored the call and the urge to slam the phone against the wall. I went in to check on my mom, who was in a deep sleep due to the morphine sulfate they had her on. I managed to text Angie. I was very busy with my mom and would call her later. After forcing myself to eat food that I didn't want and eating a shower, the hospice nurses came by to check on my mom. After checking her vital signs, they regretfully informed me that my mother would die within 48 hours. I thanked them and walked into the backyard, trying to not totally lose my mind with all that had happened and was about to happen. I managed to text Angie and told her my mother's condition was about the same. I didn't want to see her, I didn't want to talk to her, and I didn't want her showing up. I owed it to my mother to do everything I could to make sure her last moments were as peaceful as I could. The next afternoon, just before 4 p.m., my mother took her last breath with me by her side, holding her hand as her life expired. The next 3 days, I was in a total daze, meeting with her pastor and making final touches on the church and burial service, but I could not for the life of me get the images of Angie and Will fornicating right in front of me out of my mind. The more I thought about it, the angrier I got. I was mad at Angie, furious, but remembering how Will had been so overly friendly toward me made my blood boil even more. If they hadn't already been intimate when I first met him, they were soon about to. That made me want to know just exactly who this guy was. I opened the site I used for background checks. I hadn't checked him out before because I wanted to trust Angie and her decision making. I'd sensed from the moment I met him he was bad news. I actually was angry at myself for ignoring my gut instincts. I knew nothing but his first and last name. It was a distinct last name and I had difficulty spelling it correctly. When I finally got it right, a link popped up which I opened to see an old mugshot of Will's face from many years before. I was once arrested and have done some despicable things in my life. I've known people who have done horrible things intentionally and under the influence of various substances, but Will had a long rap sheet for a variety of crimes. Several DWIs, receiving stolen goods, breaking and entering, and drug arrests were listed. As I scrolled down through his record, the arrests got more heinous. I discovered that Will had been out of prison on early probation approximately 2 years after serving 9 years. When I saw the charges, they included exploitation of a minor and several other offenses of a similar nature. I admit I was disgusted. Angie had betrayed me, which hurt enough. The knowledge she may have risked me to God only knew what diseases that felon had gotten as a fiend, and then eventually in prison made me feel physically ill. I doubted Angie had any idea who she was involved with behind my back. She had a naive, trusting nature that had given her issues before, but never like that. I had no doubt anyone who knew of Will's record would have considered him a vile creature. He should have never been let out of prison, but I had my mom's funeral to focus on and had to pull myself together. By the time her funeral was over and everyone had left, I was exhausted and mentally spent. As I put my head on the pillow and tried to sleep, Angie called, not knowing my mom had passed away or that I knew what she had been up to. And that's when it was time to put my revenge in motion. It went way further than I ever expected it to and literally ruined the lives of both Will and Angie. I didn't want for it to go that far, but in the end, she deserved it. The next section is the revenge, and since it's very long, part 2 will be linked at the top of the description of this video. Part 2 is wild. You definitely want to see it, and it's going to come out the same day as this video comes out, so chances are by the time you're listening to this, it's already out. But either way, make sure to subscribe and turn on notifications so you don't miss anything. This story is devastating. The original poster here even makes it so clear to Angie that if she doesn't want to wait around for him or she meets somebody while waiting for him, just to let him know. But the fact that she wanted her cake and to eat it too is just sad. This poor guy is going through the traumatic death of his own mother and then visually witnesses his girlfriend doing this this with basically a random guy, some guy who just recently started hanging out with their group of friends. Something about the way that this whole scene is described reminds me of the movie SLC Punk, except in this story, the OP doesn't immediately engage. In SLC Punk, he basically jumps in and tries to beat up the guy right in the moment. And that's kind of what I thought was going to happen because of all the mention of the fight training and everything that led up to this. It's pretty unusual to hear somebody talking about subak, which is an old Korean martial art, but it makes sense how that would have been passed down to him because the guy was stationed in Korea. I mean, all Angie had to do was say, hey, I don't think I'm going to wait around while you're going through this whole situation with your mom, or just say, hey, I found this other guy and I want to be with this guy instead. Because the OP even said, are you sure? Is this what you want to do? Either of these things individually can completely crush someone, and the fact that they both happened at the same time, the cheating and the death of the mother, that has got to be exponentially more painful. And that pain is what breeds the anger that we see in part 2, where he really takes the gloves off and goes all out in getting revenge against the two of them. It's honestly pretty intense how far he takes the revenge. So make sure you don't miss that when it comes out. It's linked at the top of the description. Subscribe, turn on notifications, and check it out.
When you subscribe, make sure to hit the bell to turn on notifications. To finish listening to all the stories, check out the playlist at the top of the description. And if you like Am I the Jerk, make sure to subscribe to Am I the Genius. Everything will be linked down below in the description.